The meeting will start in 2 minutes. I just want to check the microphone of our school board members participating at home. Ms. Keys Gamara? Is there not Kofax? Mr. Not Kofax, would you please test your mic?
I'm here.
Thank you so much.
And I just lost.
Ms. Keys Gamara, whenever you're ready, please go ahead and test your mic. Mr. Anabudo, go ahead and test your mic as well, please.
I'm here.
Terrific. There is like something straight in my eye. I think it's the light. Okay, it is now 7:15. This April 22, 2021 regular meeting of the Fairfax County School Board will now come to order. Ms. Cohen.
Good evening.
Ms. Corbett Sanders.
Good evening, everybody.
Is there not Kofax?
Good evening.
Mr. Frisch.
Hello.
Ms. Keys Gamara.
Good evening.
Ms. McLaughlin.
Good evening.
Ms. Marin.
Hello.
Ms. Omesh.
Hello.
Ms. Pekarsky. Hello. Ms. Sizemore-Heiser.
Good evening.
Ms. Tolan.
Good evening, everyone.
And Mr. Anabudo.
Hi, everyone.
Please rise as Student Representative Nathan Anabudo leads us in the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
You may be seated. In order to comply with Section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia, it is necessary for the Board to certify that since the Fairfax County School Board convened a closed meeting on April 22, 2021, and to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the Board during the closed meeting. Motion made by Ms. Corbett Sanders, seconded by Ms. Pekarsky. All in favor? Ms. Corbett Sanders, Ms. Tolan, Ms. Pekarsky, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, Ms. McLaughlin, Mr. Frisch, Ms. Omesh, Ms. Cohen, Ms. Marin, Ms. Dana Kofax, Ms. Keys Gamara, and myself. That is unanimous. If you would like a copy of the agenda and any agenda item that is being discussed tonight, that information may be found at the back of the auditorium or on the website at fcps.edu/schoolboard/board docs. Tonight's meeting is being broadcast on Channel 99 and live streamed on the website at fcps.edu/tv/ch99. Item 2.08, naming of the black box at Woodson High School, has been removed from tonight's agenda and will be rescheduled. Item 2.05, introduction of HR Assistant Superintendent, has been removed from tonight's agenda and will be rescheduled. I call on Mr. Anabudo for a few announcements.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. First, I'd like to recognize Teacher Appreciation Week. The week of May 3rd through May 7th, 2021 has been designated as Teacher Appreciation Week. Teachers change the lives of millions of children every day. And in a year where instruction could be virtual or in person or a mix of both, their immense work and impact have provided a much needed sense of community despite the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. Educators across America are working hard to ensure every student has the tools they need to reach their full potential. Take a moment to thank a teacher during Teacher Appreciation Week. Secondly, I'd like to recognize National School Nurse Day. National School Nurse Day has recognized the significant role of school nurses in the educational setting since 1972 and will be recognized on March 12th of 2021. Professional school nurses meet the needs of today's students through their delivery of healthcare, contribution to local school communities, and promotion of safety, prevention, and wellness throughout the school year. School nurses are essential to the academic success of their students and continually strive to make a positive impact in their lives. During this challenging year, school nurses have adapted to changes and taken on unprecedented roles in support of identifying strategies and of mitigation for the health and safety of all in their care. School nurses are an invaluable asset to those they serve. This school system works in collaboration with Fairfax County Health Department to provide quality services to the students of Fairfax County Public Schools and recognizes May 12th as National School Nurse Day in Fairfax County Public Schools. Thank you, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anabudo. Agenda item 2.06, School Nutrition Employee Week. I call on Ms. Jenna Hamilton for the introduction. Your microphone is not on.
I am sorry. I will start over, and I will say that I am honored to read this recognition. School nutrition professionals have proven to be much more than dedicated employees who prepare and serve fresh, healthy, and nutritious meals. They have become recognized as essential frontline staff who work tirelessly to combat food insecurity with their welcoming and caring approach. At the onset of the COVID pandemic, our food and nutrition services staff immediately and bravely stepped up to serve the community when there was little guidance on how to safely navigate the global crisis. The food service and nutrition team has provided consistent access to meals on weekends, holidays, breaks, and all summer long, serving meals outdoors, in neighborhoods, and from school buses, in the cold, in rain, in snow, or the sunshine. School nutrition professionals strategically balance many roles behind the scenes while striving to meet the needs of their school communities. These thoughtful employees offer valuable contributions to enhance the FCPS premier education system and care for the most vulnerable families every day. This is truly meaningful work that is worth celebrating, and I thank you all for doing that. Our FNS staff has served over 13 million meals since March of 2020.
Thank you very much for that resolution, Ms. Jenna Hamilton. Item 2.07, Children's Mental Health Awareness Day. I call on Ms. Marin.
Thank you. Good evening. Children's Mental Health Awareness Day. Positive mental health is essential to a child's healthy development. Yet over 1 in 5 of our children and youth in the U.S. have a mental health issue, and only half of children and youth with behavioral health issues receive treatment. This has a profound, immediate, and lasting impact on our community. The COVID-19 pandemic created additional barriers to accessing treatment and had a wide-ranging impact on the mental health of children and youth. Throughout the pandemic, Fairfax County Public Schools invested in school-wide programming to support students' mental health and well-being. School counselors, social workers, and psychologists provided more intensive support to students experiencing mental health challenges. School staff also engaged in extensive and ongoing outreach to families and communities, providing timely information and guidance related to students' mental wellness, and offering strategies and tools that parents can use to foster mentally healthy youth. In addition, Fairfax County Public Schools is a partner with county agencies and nonprofit organizations in the Healthy Minds Fairfax initiative to increase awareness of signs of mental distress and to address barriers to accessing services through the coordination of prevention, early intervention, and treatment services. This system of care empowers families with the knowledge and resources they need to support their children's mental wellness and teaches children that caring for their mental health is a vital part of living a healthy, fulfilling life. The school board is pleased to recognize May 7th, 2021 as National Children's Mental Health Awareness Day in Fairfax County, Virginia. This is an opportunity to celebrate the work of our school division to increase awareness of the connection between mental health and social, emotional, and psychological well-being. Our students are contributing to this increased awareness through their work on the Student Advisory Council and through participation in wellness clubs and activities in their schools. Together, we are committed to offering acceptance, respect, and support to all children and their mental health needs.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marin. Item 2.09, Arab American Heritage Resolution. I call on Ms. Sizemore Heiser.
Thank you. Whereas, for over a century, Arab Americans have been making valuable contributions to virtually every aspect of American society in medicine, law, business, education, technology, government, military service, culture, and whereas, since migrating to America, men and women of Arab descent have shared their rich culture and traditions with neighbors and friends and have been and continue to be engaged members of the community. And whereas they brought with them to America the resilient family values, strong work ethic, entrepreneurial spirit, dedication to education, and diversity in faith and creed that have added strength to our great democracy. And whereas civil rights abuses, harmful stereotyping, and bullying of Arab Americans must be combated through education and awareness. And whereas Arab Americans join all Americans in the desire to see a united and diverse society where every individual is treated equally and feels safe. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Fairfax County School Board joins the Arab American Foundation in celebrating April as 2021 National Arab American Heritage Month in recognition of the many contributions Arab Americans have made to our society. I so move.
Is there a second? Ms. Omesh, thank you. Ms. Sizemore Heiser, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, just briefly. I am very honored to have been asked by the Arab American Foundation to bring forward this resolution recognizing Arab American Heritage Month. Indeed, because of the advocacy of many Arab American groups, for the first time this year, the U.S. Department of State has announced April as Arab American Heritage Month. So this month is a time to reflect on the rich and wonderful history of Arab Americans and to commemorate the numerous contributions this population made to this country. I am particularly proud to bring this because I believe that not only those who belong to certain affinity groups should speak out and speak up and be recognized, but all of us should recognize and celebrate the many diverse cultures and groups that make up the unique multicultural fabric of the United States. After all, we all have a heritage and we all belong here. That is what makes us uniquely American. I am proud to celebrate and recognize Arab American Heritage Month, and I look forward to hearing my colleagues and hopefully have their support as well.
Thank you, Ms. Sizemore Heiser. Ms. Omesh, would you like to speak to your second?
Thank you. I am proud to second this resolution to recognize Arab American Heritage Month as I believe the first Arab American elected in this county. Our Arab American identity, which is different than Muslim identity, the religious identity of which only 15% are Arab, and different than Arabic, the language that more than 422 million people around the world speak, but people often confuse to be Arab. but Arab American, the identity so many in our country, immigrant and generations rooted here, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Orthodox, Druze, and Baha'i, well-off, poor, and everything in between, with richly diverse histories, languages, dialects, and customs carrying ties and origins from Western Asia and from North Africa and the Horn of Africa, encompassing people from countries of Algeria, Bahrain, Comoros, Djibouti, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, my family's country of origin, Mauritania, Morocco, Oman, Palestine, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Tunisia, the United Arab Emirates, Western Sahara, and Yemen. It also, of course, includes populations of the Arab diaspora around the globe, 3.5 million of whom live right here in our country. Arabs and Arab Americans are most importantly valuable inherently for their shared humanity and the beauty that brings them as a part of our common fabric. But their contributions are robust and plentiful. They include, but are certainly not limited to, the invention of algebra and algorithmic math by Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, the development of one of the earliest written language systems, the world's oldest university in Morocco, founded by an empowered Arab woman, a role model of mine, Fatima al-Fihriya, the invention of surgical instruments still used today, and an early method of administering anesthesia to patients by al-Zawahiri. And fun fact, the earliest evidence of a complex written mathematics system in approximately 3000 BC, which brought us our current 0 to 9 numerical system, which we rely on every day, and in fact is formally called the Arabic numeric system. Since the formulation of the US, people of Arab descent have continued in every aspect of American society and culture and contributed with more than 100 years, which was stated in the resolution, but in fact for longer, and have sought greater justice for all through public service and activism since before this country was even known to be America. Ralph Johns organized in solidarity with African Americans in Greensboro sit-ins during the Civil Rights Movement. Naji Daifullah organized in the US labor movement alongside Cesar Chavez on behalf of farm workers. Today, Dr. Munahana Atisha researches and brings attention to the ongoing water crisis in Flint, Michigan. And hundreds of Arab American staff who serve our students across this school division every day. You might also recognize names like Ralph Nader, or Steve Jobs, or ML Clooney, or even Shakira, Paul Abdul, and yes, DJ Khaled. With all the beauty that the identity represents for our nation and the world, I'd be remiss not to also acknowledge realities and hope that in celebration together today, we commit to better in shaping our country in this system's narrative. All too often, we have seen minimization and erasure of Arab American identities and experiences. To commend Arabs for being peaceful, while well-intended, is loaded and offensive. Especially since 9/11, many Arab Americans, including my own family and hundreds of families right here in Fairfax, faced profiling, criminalization, surveillance, and biased treatment under the law. Hate crimes continue to persist, as does discrimination with law enforcement, in airports, and in public places. These images have not only been harmful to people, but have been used to justify great violence at the hands of our own across this country and around the world, fueling imperialism across the globe. Even in our own system, my own younger brother told me that he saw a video called "Why They Hate Us." But with these realities in mind, there is a need to think about how we fold the Arab American narrative in our anti-racist work, in the curriculum and in the practices that we talk about, intending to be inclusive in. I hope that this month will inspire us to see that Arabs and Arab Americans in our own system are just like anyone else. And I ask that our system build from today and consider this a welcome step. Let us see our Arab and Arab American students and staff by making this identity a separate category in how we think about ethnicity. I've always had to tick the box white, because while growing up, this system and many others didn't see me. But today is a welcome opportunity as we celebrate this month and taking a remarkable new step and following the President's lead to finally inaugurate recognition of resolutions like this. I hope that as a board, as a community, we can all recognize the realities involved and celebrate together in this month by taking positive steps forward.
Thank you, Ms. Omesh. Any other board members wishing to speak to this resolution? Ms. Corbett-Sanders?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I want to thank Ms. Rachna Sizemore-Heiser and Ms. Omesh and the Arab American Society for bringing this resolution forward. I had expressed concerns earlier about the limitation in this resolution of it only being 100 years of contributions of Arab Americans to our society. I wanted to do some a little bit of history. I think I would be remiss in not congratulating Ms. Omesh for giving us such an in-depth history lesson, but I wanted to share some Arab American history in that a month and a half prior to our signing the Declaration of Independence here in the United States, an Arab American died on behalf of this country in fighting in the Revolutionary War. We had multiple incidences of Arab Americans who had immigrated to the shores of North America that fought on behalf of the colonials. And the very first country in the world to actually acknowledge the existence of the United States in the form of a treaty was that of Morocco, which in 1787, they actually entered into the Treaty of Friendship between the United States and Morocco. And so when we look at Arab Americans, I think we are remiss if we limit it to 100 years. And I just want to encourage people to understand that like other nationalities or other ethnic groups in the United States, Arab Americans have contributed throughout our history. And they've contributed in the arts, in the sciences, in the halls of Congress, and are known for their wonderful philanthropy, not only through Arab American organizations, but also in in areas such as healthcare with St. Jude's Hospital for Children. And so I just am so appreciative of my colleagues for bringing this forward tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corbett-Sanders. Seeing no other speakers, Ms. Marin, please go ahead.
Yes, just briefly, I want to thank both of our motion makers and particularly Ms. Omesh, who I've learned so much from during the campaign trail and here, and certainly this evening. And I think that, you know, our school system has done a lot to increase our awareness of racism around Black Americans and African Americans and slavery, but we really need to bridge this frontier of other marginalized groups who have been dealt a narrative that is not true to who they are. So I encourage our superintendent to keep working on the social studies curriculum and infusing more anti-racist, anti-bias work into our curriculum about this and other groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marin. Seeing no other speakers, I will now call for the vote. All in favor of this resolution brought before us by Ms. Sizemore-Heiser and Ms. Omesh, please raise your hands. We have Ms. Corbett-Sanders, Ms. Tolan, Ms. Pekarsky, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, Ms. McLaughlin, Mr. Frisch, Ms. Omesh, Ms. Marin, Ms. Cohen, Ms. Derna Koufax, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, and myself. That is unanimous. Agenda item 3.01, citizen participation. The next order of business is citizens' participation. Speakers are requested to limit their remarks to not more than 3 minutes. The school board will not hear statements involving issues that have been scheduled for public hearings, such as capital improvement program, budget, and boundaries. Speakers should address new business, action items, or resolutions as listed on the meeting agenda. Complaints regarding individual students or school-based employees should be directed to the appropriate school principal or other school official. Speakers should refrain from using personally identifiable information in connection with an individual student and are expected to deliver their comments with the decorum and respect appropriate to the conduct of the public's business. In-person speakers should wear a mask, stand behind the black line on the floor, and speak into the microphone. Please be sure to not touch the podium. Thank you for your cooperation, and thanks to those who have come to speak to us today. Tonight, 10 citizens have signed up to address the board, and we also have 3 video testimonies. And I'll ask the clerk to call our citizen participants.
Our first speaker is Kathy Zhang.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Zhang, and I am a junior at McLean High School. At 6:20 p.m. on March 22, 2021, Just a few weeks ago, out on the field of Longfellow Middle School where I was once a student, an Asian teenager was verbally harassed and spat on by 4 other teenagers. This incident shook me, and I wonder how easily this could have been me or my younger sister currently at Longfellow. Unfortunately, across the nation, similar Asian hate incidents and even physical attacks have been on the rise. AAPI American youth have been emotionally impacted for a long time. Many view their race as an obstacle rather than an asset. Others are confused by their identity and feel left out in society. Growing up, I've seen and heard many feel embarrassed by their physical appearance, the food they eat, and even their names. I appreciate the support that the AAPI community has received from our board members in schools amidst anti-Asian hate. However, I hope that this support can turn into real and lasting action. We need improvements to our educational system and changes to the curriculum we teach our students. Education holds the key to increased understanding and creates sympathy, empathy amongst different groups. Therefore, respected school board members and Dr. Braban, I strongly advocate that Asian American history be incorporated in our K-12 required school curriculums. I specifically advocate for the inclusion of projects, deeper discussion, and entire units that cover both Asian American struggles and triumphs. Currently, AAPI students make up around 20% of the FCPS student body. However, based on my experience from kindergarten all the way till now in junior year, I have not had a single unit entirely dedicated to AAPI history or significance. Save for the Chinese Exclusion Act or Japanese internment camps, the experiences and contributions of AAPI Americans have been absent in FCPS curriculums. The impact of additions to the curriculum is twofold. First, students and teachers will learn more about contributions of AAPI Americans in U.S. history and society to aid understanding. And secondly, of equal importance, students of AAPI descent will become more proud of who they are and feel a greater sense of belonging. Last week, I had the pleasure of meeting our school board member, Miss Karen Keys-Gamara, as a student representative. Something she said left me a strong impression. Whether it is African American history, Asian American history, or other histories, most definitely including Arab American history, these are not just the histories of individual communities, these are all American history. And thus, I urge the board to take action and incorporate AAPI history in our FCPS required curriculums because no student should have to experience what the teenager boy outside Longfellow experienced, and no student should have to feel unrepresented in classroom learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tom Goudreau.
On April 8th, I asked the school board to provide FCPS special education students more protection than they had this past year. Sadly, FCPS's presentation tonight is absent any commitment to not repeat what they did this past year. This past year, my son's individualized education plan wasn't worth the paper it was written on. The plan we had in place as of May 2020 was simply not supported by FCPS last August through November. 3 of his 5 IEP goals were not addressed because FCPS refused to provide the services. The progress made the prior year was undone, and new negative behaviors emerged as a result of the FCPS virtual education program. This past October, I wrote to members of this school board explaining in detail my son's dilemma. I included the facts pertaining to his case and shared the FCPS collected data documenting his distress. I either did not receive a response or in one case was politely listened to with no real assistance offered. When I finally filed a due process complaint, FCPS fully resourced their legal fight. They sought to have the matter dismissed, they fought requests for discovery, they even forwarded my letters to the school board. While FCPS would not spend Fairfax County taxpayer dollars on supporting my son's IEP, they did spend heavily on fighting to preserve their right to deny my son promised services. And FCPS has increased their legal budgets to continue fighting parents of special education students. The only special education safeguard this past year was the due process hearing officer, the state of Virginia appointed mediator, and the law. Sadly, it takes time to enforce the law. School board statements of, quote, COVID has been in charge, unquote, make clear that FCPS believes COVID waives your IDEA obligations. I don't see in the FCPS application a statement that FCPS will ignore IEPs while COVID remains a risk, but that appears to be the approved FCPS practice. Your fears are not sufficient reason to ignore the law. A purpose-driven organization cannot ignore their principles. One school board member offered that Dr. Boyd joining the team would make things better, and I hope that's true. But I do worry that the systemic failures of the past year cannot be overcome by simply hiring one new assistant superintendent. I worry that FCPS and this school board have opened the door to additional, quote, unusual circumstances, unquote, that make IDEA conditional rather than a legal or ethical obligation. Good night.
Our next speaker is Steve Crowell.
Hi, how are y'all? I want to say I appreciate you letting me be here to speak. I'm going to start off by saying I apologize. Up until this afternoon, my wife was scheduled to be here, so I had little time to prepare. You're going to get my rambling thoughts. She's the business development person, probably being more eloquent than me. We're stuck with the engineer, although I did perhaps appreciate Ms. Amisha's commentary, all of it certainly, but perhaps the one in the room who most appreciated the mathematical references. So I do want to say that I said to myself, how could I come and help? What value could I bring to this conversation? And, you know, I'm an engineer, right? Math, data science, that's my thing. So I said, let me look at your school board statements. I think it was the laws of governance or the rules of governance you had, and what could I maybe bring to help you make decisions and open the county, like get kids back in school. That was really the thing my wife told me to focus on. I did realize, though, that you guys probably already do that, right? I mean, your rules of governance say you're going to come to these meetings ready to discuss everything with the data already in your minds. You've studied, you come prepared. So I'm probably not going to tell you something you don't already know. I looked at the statistics, and some of them were confusing to me, honestly. But I did get the impression that public input, the community's desires, were kind of an overarching theme to what the school board wanted to achieve. And I'm not going to lie, I don't envy you guys, right? Because you got a massive county. You got tons of people that are here, and trying to distill all of those thoughts and desires and opinions into a single action that's going to be successful for everyone, it's got to be next to impossible. But I did come across one statement. It's actually the number one item in the beliefs section of the county, which said, and I'm going to try and paraphrase here, but that each student is entitled to an excellent education meeting their individual needs. I felt like that was the one opportunity that was sort of given or allowed to the school board to not try to have to find a one-size-fits-all kind of solution. I don't think you're going to ever get to a point where everyone's going to be happy. You know, some people will feel comfortable coming back to school. Some people won't feel comfortable yet. I know the last speaker spoke about COVID and those concerns. Obviously a real thing, but I think the opposite is true too. There are some folks who strongly feel that their kids could safely get back to school, and I would implore you as a group to reach out and look for opportunities to be creative and find solutions and get kids back into school. My mom taught in Fairfax County for 30 years. I know the county's been a leading school system, but sometimes it's okay not to be a leader, right? I mean, there could be other ideas from other systems, other folks who've successfully brought kids back to school. Genius steals, right? I mean, there's no shame in getting ideas, looking around, and sorry. Anyway, appreciate it. Y'all have a nice evening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Christine Knowles.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak before you tonight. Before I begin, I must state that the following comments are my own personal opinions and don't represent those of any professional organizations. My husband and I are both Department of Defense employees who moved to the area unexpectedly in the summer of 2019. With little time to learn the area or house hunt, we simply found the first home that could accommodate our family's needs with one stipulation. It had to be in Fairfax County. We chose this county because we were told that it had some of the best schools, not just in Virginia, but in the country. Though many positive strides have been made over the past few weeks, I'm not going to mince my words. This past year has been an unmitigated disaster for many families, but it has affected your military-connected families in ways that you have probably not thought of. Families who moved here a few months ago from states where schools have opened now see regression in their children's overall achievements. Families who are set to move this summer to states where schools have been opened are concerned that their children will be academically behind their peers. I know service members, our family included, who have struggled to meet the demands of their military professions for over a year because schools have not been open and they have needed to be home in order to ensure their children are being educated. For families leaving this state, the damage has unfortunately already been done. So let's focus on how to improve moving forward. This past year has highlighted that we military families lack representation at this school board level to advocate for our unique challenges and needs. I understand that there are supposed to be entities that provide this voice for our community at large. The Virginia Military Interstate Children's Compact Commission representatives and school liaison officers assigned to each local base have been touted as a military family's voice to their local school communities. But in any meaningful sense, these entities have been silent this past year, when we have needed their advocacy the most. Therefore, I'm proposing that the school board develop better methods to partner and work with its local military community. Without meaningful advocacy, the school board will continue to see frustration from military families and an overall perception that FCPS cares little for its military children outside of the money that they generate from turning in their federal impact aid forms. The school system's inability or unwillingness to find meaningful ways to provide the free and appropriate education children need, deserve, and are required by law to provide have decreased our families' confidence moving forward. Despite reassurances given otherwise, given the flail surrounding the attempts to bring back students to the classroom over the past year, and more recently the drama associated with bringing children back to 4 days of in-person instruction, at this point, I'm not at all confident in FCPS's statements that they will provide 5 days of in-person instruction in the fall. April is the month of the military child. Wearing purple or posting on social media platitudes about supporting military children mean nothing to me. Set the example to this community, state, and nation that you actually support your 14,000 military-connected students and their parents who have raised their hands to support and defend this nation and develop better ways to work with your military community and commit to getting our kids back in the classroom 5 days a week. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Iman Abdul Rahman.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm a Fairfax County parent and an emergency medicine doctor. I come here today to talk to you about a little bit about my experience. I've been working in the emergency department for 10 years, and I understand today we're talking about mental health in children. One of the most difficult cases that I treat are families that come in with mental illness, including suicidal ideation and suicidal attempt. Sometimes the mental anguish that brings them to the emergency room is related to academic achievement and the resulting conflict with their parents and caregivers. I am very worried about the effect of a year of learning loss will have in children this year, and that's why I'm here today. I'm a little nervous speaking. I don't like speaking in public, but I found that I needed to get the courage to come and speak to you today because of the enormous aspect of this problem. During the pandemic, my son was a kindergarten student, and I recognized that while he was reading, he was guessing at unfamiliar words. And this was causing a lot of stress to me and to him, and it was getting very frustrating. If I didn't intervene, I knew too well the consequences of poor reading will have on disruptive behavior and depression later on. Among other consequences, incarceration. As a pediatrician, I like to focus on prevention. So I spent many sleepless nights looking for an evidence-based curriculum to teach him how to read. And that's when I learned that the curriculum being used to teach him actually was not based fully in science. What do I mean by the science of reading? For decoding aspects of reading, a curriculum that teaches the 44 sounds of English explicitly and teaching the patterns that represent those sounds systematically using books known as decodable books to practice those sounds. I'm talking about teaching children K-3 the code to be able to pull words off the page and be proficient by 3rd grade. I'm here to talk to you about the families that don't have the same resources that I do to help my son. And that will be at risk economically as well as in their physical and mental well-being, which is our topic today. I appeal to you to use the opportunity of this year-long loss of reading to fully implement the science of reading in the curriculum so that we don't miss one kid. The current system, 30% of children are not proficient readers. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Vanessa Hall.
Hi, I'm here to ask that you approve the special education budget for fiscal year 2022. This year's $600+ million budget will support about 27,000 students, one of which is mine. In her short life, my daughter has benefited from a myriad of services, starting with a preschool visit to Child Find for hearing issues. We've traveled the world of special ed, from assessment to speech pathologists, reading specialists, and so much more support for her 504, which eventually became an IEP. We've witnessed only a small portion of the dedicated professionals and services that are covered by this budget, but I'm thankful every day, even in this crazy pandemic year, for all the professional care and proactive support that FCPS provides. I know that educators and staff are the fundamental component of any good special education plan. They're often the first line of defense to identify learning disabilities, and they are the ones who make the most difference in a child's life to overcome their unique challenges and be able to learn. For us, the benefits of FCPS and their special education services are clear. Teachers enabled my daughter to read, and honestly, I can never repay that gift. This is why I ask you to also support collective bargaining for our teacher and staff associations. I can't even believe I'm talking about this because other than my grandpa, who was in the Steelworkers Union, I never thought about unions outside of American Civ class decades ago. What has changed? Well, I've witnessed horrific accusations and threatening behavior directed towards teachers and the school board this year. I've witnessed the chilling effect when teachers are silenced and they cannot advocate for their own safety, the safety of others, or even on critical aspects of children's education. They're teachers. If they can't talk about education without fear of retribution, then who will? Honestly, I fear what this means for my children and other students if teachers are silenced and their lifetime of work is undermined by outside organizations. So please pass a comprehensive collective bargaining resolution when it comes up. This can't just be about salaries and benefits. Education employees need the ability to bargain on all aspects of their working conditions, because it's clear that teacher working conditions are student working conditions. By empowering teachers, we empower their students. The quality of instruction can only improve if teachers are able to negotiate for the educational tools, professional time, and smaller class sizes that they need and we need so that they can provide quality education. Teachers supported and taught my daughter to read and write despite severe dyslexia. Now it is time that I return the favor by writing and reading this public input to support them. Pay teachers well, support them, and give them full collective bargaining rights. From personal experience, I know that they will use these rights to improve the lives and educational opportunities for all students. So again, when it's time, full collective bargaining rights for teachers, please, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kimberly Adams.
Good evening, Chair Anderson, members of the school board, Dr. Brabrand, and leadership team. My name is Kimberly Adams, and I am the president of the Fairfax Education Association. In the first week of May, we once again celebrate all of our school system employees during Teacher Appreciation Week. We particularly honor the contributions of our food and nutrition services staff for their work to provide meals to students and their families, which were more critical than ever during this pandemic. In the second week of May, we acknowledge the work of our school nurses. It is important to note that they have been administering vaccinations through the health department, often working 7 days a week, more than 8 hours a day, and most recently, in addition to their regular school hours. The FEA thanks each of them for their immense contribution to the battle against COVID-19. All of your employees have faced this pandemic with as much grace as possible and done everything they could to make it work for our students. As you are reported to tonight, some of those employees are no longer with FCPS. I submit to you that many left because the working conditions were untenable, and they had to put their own health or that of their family first. That is a choice we are often forced to make when the decisions are made without us at the table. Take the job as it is or leave. That brings us to the need for deeper collaboration. Your employees are the ones who make everything happen inside our schools, centers, offices, and depots. For decades, the FEA has been engaged in problem solving and bringing solutions to the table. We must ensure student success through a world-class education for our students. That must be led by a premier workforce, maintaining a caring culture with prudent resource stewardship. The system's own strategic plan guides much of what we engage in daily as employees of FCPS. Without question, everything we do is to support the needs of our students. Making sure that your employee voice is heard and respected is critical to keeping our system world-class. The FEA endorses and believes students need to be in school as much as possible, safely. We are ready and willing to work to make sure that this happens this fall. We recognize the extraordinary difference between what we know today about COVID-19 and what we didn't know just 12 months ago. The plan for next school year that the FCPS leadership team proposed on Tuesday needs some revision. You should have received a proposal from the FEA on how we might move forward as a system in the next school year. We believe that a number of families may still need to choose a virtual option. As we have repeatedly stated publicly, we do not believe this is best satisfied in a concurrent learning model. FCPS has proven that it can provide a virtual option and an in-person option, and we believe that each experience must be separate from the other. Virtual students paired with virtual teachers and in-person with in-person teachers as much as possible, not hybrid and not concurrent for most classes. This can be achieved with a great deal of flexibility and some creativity. We appreciate that the superintendent has committed to discussion on the proposal. We will be ready, and we can do incredible things this fall together, but this challenge requires that we truly work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jenna Hamilton.
Good evening. I'm a parent in the Mount Vernon Pyramid, and first, I want to thank the principals in our area who have worked hard to provide the opportunity of 4 days of in-person to many students, particularly the teams at Whitman Middle School and Mount Vernon High School who have shown key leadership. As the board reviews the separations report, I wanted to address an issue impacting teacher retention. Namely, I've yet to meet an exhausted teacher or parent who feels the concurrent teaching model is benefiting anyone in the system, and I'm glad that the board recognized that this week. At the same time, the idea of FCPS creating a permanent proprietary virtual education system should not be a priority right now, as FCPS changed the grading systems to cover failing grades and encourages students not to take SOLs for many reasons, including an inability to fully cover the curriculum virtually. There seems to be tacit acknowledgement that virtual is not producing a high-quality educational outcome for most students. Why would FCPS institutionalize such a system? In our pyramid, schools already struggle greatly to keep up attendance and to keep students, especially older students, engaged. A system-sponsored virtual option that allows for more generalized enrollment is likely to lead to more lost students. FCPS should provide its pre-pandemic, tightly targeted virtual option for specific students, encourage families who wish to keep children at home to investigate virtual Virginia, and spend all of its efforts re-normalizing the idea that being in school in FCPS means attending school in person full-time. Many students I talk to in my area no longer view that as true or necessary. I can't stress this enough. After over a year, they no longer understand why they have to bother to attend school, and many will tell you they prefer the ease that comes with taking tests at home. A permanent FCPS virtual option will create a system where the quality of education runs on 2 tracks, and that's not acceptable. Today, we cannot forget the current hardworking effort to move hybrid students into 4 days of in-person that has created a school-by-school patchwork quilt of access for students. While over 100 schools seem to have offered 4 days to all hybrid, dozens have not, begging the question, if FCPS cannot get this much smaller subset of students back in school for 4 days system-wide, how can we believe it will happen for almost all students 5 days a week next school year? Simply saying, don't worry about it, we believe we can do it, isn't a sufficient answer because parents have 14 months of evidence for exactly why we should worry about it. FCPS needs to be transparent with families about exactly what's going to make fall work better, or be honest with families if 5 days can't happen unless the CDC eliminates all school guidance. We cannot have a fall experience where students are made to feel less than, as many do now, because they were not picked for the full-time school team in the FCPS metaphorical gym class. Better, more robust support, consistent expectations and goals must be provided to all school teams in the system in order for families to have faith in the management of FCPS. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Nan Itel.
Thank you. I am Nan Itel, the parent of a high school junior who has been actively and constructively engaging with the school board and superintendent's office for over a year now on reopening FCPS schools. Full and equal access to public education is and has been the greatest equalizer of opportunities for Americans for generations. I am the proud product of a public education, a deep believer in its value, and the granddaughter of a public school teacher and elementary school principal who was a legendary trailblazer in the Deep South until her retirement decades ago. Today, as part of a select and favored few, my son went to school in person for the third day in a row for the first time since March 12, 2020. Given this school board's and this superintendent's lack of leadership and can't-do attitude for 13 months, I am deeply grateful for the can-do attitude of our high school principal. Unlike most of this board, she removes obstacles and doesn't create them. Unlike the superintendent, she can develop and execute a plan. And unlike most of this board, in her actions and in her strategic leadership, she demonstrates that she cares deeply for her students and for her staff. Likewise, I'm grateful for the many teachers who've returned to the classroom at my son's school and across the county. 3 key points to address briefly on the return to school. First, all students who want to return to school in person now should be allowed to do so. 2, if FCPS cannot return all students to in-person school 5 days a week now, how will you possibly do that come August? And 3, do not impose a concurrent teaching model in the fall, no matter what you do. First, there are students across Fairfax County who want to return to in-person school now, but who have been denied a spot because of capacity issues arising from the rules of return. This is indefensible dystopian decision-making, a Hunger Games level of random cruelty imposed by your decisions to separate our children into the returned and to the denied. Who ever thought children would have to beg to get on the list to go to school? Second, what will be different on August 22nd versus today, April 22nd, with respect to school capacity and distancing? There's no indication CDC guidance will change, yet adhering to that guidance is one of the explanations for limited return now. You have misled FCPS families repeatedly for the last year and broken our trust. Even on the inflated grading scales you've implemented to hide your many failures, you still get an F in leadership. Third, to my knowledge, no one, including the teachers' associations, believes concurrent teaching should resume in the fall, but that appears to be part of the plan. Not only is this an undue burden on teachers, it deprives children of their teachers' undivided attention in the classroom. There are other options. FCPS should avail itself of those. Open FCPS 5 days a week.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Bethany Heim.
Hello, my name is Bethany Heim, and I am a parent of a kindergartner and first grader. I am relieved that school board members agree that concurrent learning is not optimal for students and teachers, and I hope that concurrent learning will not be pursued in the next school year. At the same time, I understand that virtual classes have worked well for some families. To support those families, I encourage Fairfax County Public Schools to actively promote and partner with Virtual Virginia. Also, I hope the school district embraces virtual students by allowing them to participate in their home schools, sports, and social activities. This will help foster a sense of community and enable some of the same development and socialization opportunities provided to those who attend school in person. To be clear, I support allowing all students the opportunity to return to school 5 days a week as soon as possible. Teachers were prioritized for the vaccine to enable this return. The CDC and county health officials have stated that it is safe for students and teachers to return to the classroom. My husband and I both work full-time jobs, and unfortunately, we do not have confidence that students will return to the classroom 5 days a week this fall, given the politics and bureaucracy associated with public schools. We also fear that the classroom experience will be harsh and unwelcoming. So our family did not want to take any chances. We enrolled our kids in a private school for the next school year. I hope my fears are not warranted, and I hope Fairfax County figures it out. And now I want to switch to a different topic. I have read that the state of Virginia is moving forward with the Virginia Math Pathways Initiative. While there is still much for me to learn, my initial reaction is to wonder why this initiative seems to be taking away existing opportunities that work well for many students in order to address achievements or testing gaps. Why not take a more focused approach targeted to those students who need additional resources and support? I hope the school board will consider having a working session to discuss this topic and to share your thoughts with parents. Thank you.
Thank you. We have video testimony now from Robert Rigby.
Good evening, school board members, Dr. Braybrand, and senior staff. I am Robert Rigby, co-president of FCPS Pride, which is an LGBTQIA+ organization for people in Fairfax County public schools. Now, I've read the SRNR for 23 years now, and I think it's improved a lot. There's less about justice and punishment and more on reconciliation and problem solving. There's more information about non-discrimination and anti-harassment than ever. Yet LGBTQ+ students, when they trust you to talk, speak often of unsolved harassment. For years, I've been frustrated with their denial of naming names. As admins often say to me, we can't do anything if we can't get a name. The kids say, of course, that naming names and fingering a harasser usually only makes it worse. So, what do we do? FCPS's approach of finding the perpetrator and doing something about their behavior only solves a fraction of the larger and more endemic problem. The solution is to change school culture by making schools overtly and obviously welcome. The new state model policy recommends assemblies and lessons for every student on welcoming and understanding. It recommends things like stickers and flags all over the school, stuff like that. Arlington celebrates certain LGBTQIA+ awareness days with posters and displays in the lobby and flags all over the school and such. We could do that too. Schools should show that they are welcoming, not just quietly indicate that they are tolerant. We do some of that. Alas, general anti-bullying lessons that don't say who usually gets bullied have almost no effect on behavior. You really need to say who you want kids not to bully. Black people, Asian people, especially now, people with disabilities, LGBTQIA+ people, big or small people, immigrants, military children. You already have a list. So, to stop harassment, we need to celebrate communities and change school culture. Thank you for listening.
We have video testimony from Christy Hudson.
Thank you to the schools who have done the right thing by opening their doors for 4 days of in-person learning. On behalf of parents of thousands of struggling FCPS students, we are grateful. To our principals who used creativity, ingenuity, and Herculean efforts to open schools, we recognize and thank you. Teachers, custodians, and support staff, thank you for rearranging desks for the millionth time, for pitching tents, and for your unwavering support of the students in this system. To our FCPS leadership team, you have also done something extraordinary. You have somehow managed to fail everyone. Principals and school admin have not been provided proper guidance. Teachers have had impossible demands placed upon them. Parents are angry and students are failing. As the saying goes, you can't please everyone, but it's an impressive feat to upset every stakeholder in the system. At the time of this recording, 95 of FCPS's schools are opening for 4 days of in-person instruction to students who want it. What about the other 100 plus schools? There is chaos within the system. We have siblings not being offered the same opportunities. We have elementary age kids thinking their teachers don't like them because they weren't invited to attend school 4 days like their classmates were. Listen to them. Invited to attend school. You have created a system where families and students are having to be invited to attend public school. This is a problem. This is not what public education in America is supposed to look like. You have messed up so spectacularly, we now need to normalize the fact that children go to school. We now need to normalize the fact that children go to school. Your only hope of redemption is opening schools 5 days a week in the fall for all students with a teacher in the classroom without teachers being forced to teach concurrently. You've said your plan is to open 5 days, but now tell us how. It's not enough to announce it. We've lost trust and faith in the system. Show us how you will open 5 days a week when you can't even get all hybrid students in the school now for 4 days. How will you do it? We're waiting. No more delays, no more pauses, and no more empty promises. Save the school system before it's too far gone.
Our final video testimony is from Guadalupe
My third grader
Williamson.
attends a Title I school in the district and has an intellectual disability. We also have a second grader in private school enjoying in-person learning for 8 months now. Despite the pandemic, my son in private school is doing great academically and emotionally, but my son in FCPS is not doing well, emotionally or academically, because for almost a year, he wasn't allowed into his classroom. My son was set to return to school last October with Group 3, but the board's poor planning actually meant he returned to school until 4 months later. His therapies continue to be provided virtually, and this has only changed because I, not you, have been pushing the school to do better. FCPS is now having to provide recovery services for children with disabilities. Some of these recovery services are being offered on Saturdays, virtually. Students need recovery service because virtual learning didn't work. So why is the recovery being provided virtually? Bad ideas abound at FCPS. Lead district representative said at the last board meeting that most students are currently virtual because of fear of COVID. Let me tell you other important reasons that weren't mentioned. Number one, students today are stuck with virtual because this decision was made long ago. Many of these parents wish they could change their choice. Number two, what you offered last year was never a full-time option, but a hybrid model. Several parents said sending children 2 days complicated work schedules and was inconsistent, so they chose virtual. Number three, some schools like my son's presented to us a reality of in-person learning where kids will not be allowed to socialize, not allowed to use materials, will not have recess, and were told they will continue to use their laptops all day. The scenario was so sad it made virtual appealing. My school board representative also said that schools aren't open because COVID was in control. The last thing we want to hear from our elected officials is that they aren't in control. We get the groceries, the mail, electricity, doctor appointments, and I am glad all of these service providers remain in control, as did my son's private school and more than 50% of the school systems in the country. Considering how much from our taxes goes to FCPS, I had expected a school district that today will be leading the way during the pandemic, ensuring their students receive the best education despite the challenges. Instead, its reputation is blasted everywhere in the media. Teachers are exhausted and the students are leaving. Why even today are schools not open for all? You have the vaccines, you have millions in COVID aid, and you have students eager to be in the classroom. The only thing we're clearly missing is leadership. Those advocating for schools to remain closed this past month denying a free, appropriate public education to my child with special needs should resign. You did not lead the district based on needs of the students you represent, but instead allowed interest groups to influence your decisions. After all, lead district representative said it best. School board members are not in control.
Item 3.02, Student Representative Matters. I call on Mr. Anabudo.
Hi, Dr. Anderson. You hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. First, as always, just want to say thank you. It's an honor to be able to speak before all of you tonight. First, I want to speak briefly because I realized that, I didn't get to speak at my last Student Representative Matters, so I haven't got to talk on this topic for a bit. But I want to speak briefly about instances of hate. Instances of hateful behavior are on the rise nationally and are unfortunately also being video recorded of the hate that exists within our current school system. I want to echo the concerns of students who have come to speak to you today. We've heard from one student, and multiple students have come to speak to you at past board meetings who are imploring the school board and leadership to ensure that we're using the power of education to not only highlight the importance of minority communities within FCPS, but to educate away ignorance that exists in the behavior and practices that we see from students across the county. It is important that we work together as a school system to use the power, the light that education is, to ensure that we are raising, we are developing, we are nurturing young minds who are not ignorant and who don't act in ways that are harmful or negative or derogatory to other members of our community. That's the role the school. That's the role the school board members and leadership can play in this part. But equally important, I want to speak to any students who are watching, and I want to say that I call on you to be better. You must pick your words extremely carefully and remember that each and every single one of them carry weight and they carry power. As ridiculous as it might sound, I urge you to reject the rhetoric that we all too often hear from the adults in our lives. You must know that the way you speak and the way you act has impacts on the people around you, whether you realize it or not. Many of you may have heard that before, and some of you might not have, but it's extremely important and it's extremely true. And we need to continue to try and be better as young people who care about the way that our peers feel and the way our school system is perceived. Because some of the stuff I've been seeing online recently is not positive, and we can work together to change that. That's the one piece about that I wanted to speak to. And on a slightly lighter note, I wanted to also touch on the student representative elections that are happening on Monday. An FCPS student voice is an extremely integral part of our school system and is part of the reason I'm proud to call myself an FCPS student. On Monday, we will be electing the next student representative to the school board, the person who will take over the position that I currently hold starting July 1. I am extremely excited to hear from all the candidates. We have over 100 people running to be the student rep this year, and I could not be more thrilled. It's a testament to the way that the Student Advisory Council, as well as leadership, prioritizes the voices of young people across the school system. And it's also a testament to the young people in our school system who are willing, ready, and able to make a difference and impact change because they care about the way our school system is being run. The need to adapt and change and grow and continue has been highlighted by this pandemic. And it will be one of the primary things that the next student representative has to face as we deal with a whole swath of now high school students whose transcripts, whose time in high school have been forever altered by this pandemic. My class, the class of 2021, in many ways, while we've got, the short end of the stick as far as senior year goes, we've got it easy as far as post-secondary stuff goes because the pandemic affected only one of our high school years. That can't be said for the rest of the classes. And that will be a very, very tough challenge for the next student rep to have to tackle. And I will partner them with that. And I plan to start right now as I move into the next phase of my leadership. I plan to start meeting with students to find out specific things that the school board needs to address to ensure that we're helping students deal with post-pandemic recovery in ways that are in addition to the things that leadership has already identified, like virtual learning recovery and fifth quarter recovery and summer school and stuff. So that's my plan, and I want to highlight and urge the school board to make sure that we're prioritizing student voice and wellness in this transition process. You know, as we talk about 5 days of in-person school in the fall, and as we talk about returning as many kids as possible back into school buildings, I want to make sure that we understand that any type of transition and any type of change is difficult for students, especially in a year that has been full of change and transition and uncertainty. So I've said it before and I'll keep saying it. Centering student voice and centering the wellness of the young people who have been through so much already is going to be the key to not only a successful transition to the fall school year, but successful outcomes beyond just the school year for students and young people in Fairfax County as we move out of, hopefully, what has been a very, very, very difficult school year. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Anderson. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Anabudo. Item 3.03, FCPS's request to apply for the School Division of Innovation, SDI designation. I call on Dr. Brabrand for the introduction.
Thank you, Chairman Anderson, members of the school board. Really excited to talk about this wonderful opportunity for Fairfax County Public Schools to apply for the Virginia Department of Education School Division of Innovation designation. And we have our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Sloan Presidio, here to give you a brief summary of the application, and we'll be glad to take any questions that you may have. Dr. Presidio.
All right, well, thank you, Dr. Brabrand, and good evening, everybody. And before I talk about the application to VDOE, I just want to say to Mr. Anabudo, after 9 years in this position and working with 9 different representatives to the school board, you have set the bar incredibly high, and I hope everybody heard that we have an unprecedented number of over 100, I actually think it's over 120 applicants for this position that will be running on Monday. And again, Nathan, I think that's not a testament necessarily to the work that we're doing as a system. A lot of that is a testament to the leadership and engagement that you've shown this year. So thank you for that. And we hope that you're going to stick around and do some mentoring of your replacement as well. So thank you to Nathan. I do want to thank the board for this opportunity to speak briefly on our application to VDOE for our recognition of a School Division of Innovation. We do believe that seeking status at the state level as a School Division of Innovation would really be an important opportunity for us to pursue some of our equity goals, namely to make sure that all of our students are engaged in rigorous learning experiences and engaged in work that is really innovative in terms of teaching and learning practices in the classroom. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a minute, but if we could go to the next slide, I wanted to provide just a little bit, and it looks like we have the wrong presentation, but that's okay. I'm going to tell you about it anyway. The School Division of Innovation application essentially is an application that's put forward by VDOE to recognize school systems that in their language, quote, improve student learning, educational performance, and college career and citizenship readiness skills. And the application itself is a designation by the State Department of Education to encourage innovative practices in school systems. So that language is very broad. There's a lot of leeway in what your application could look like and entail. But specifically, the requirements and details are really outlined in the Code of Virginia, which is included in our full application that's posted on board docs. 3 of the big points that I would point out about the application process. One, it's a 3-year designation by the State Department of Education for divisions that are recognized. There is an annual reporting requirement to the state about progress towards our goals. The application date is incredibly important because that's May 3rd, right around the corner. And then the Department of Education will review the applications, make recommendations to the Board of Education that will vote on the applications on July 22nd. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide and see maybe we can catch up a little bit here. I want to talk just a little bit more about the specific goals of our application. And again, I apologize, the slides don't really match with what we had prepared. But I want to talk about the goals, and we have 3 goals in the application. And the first goal is related to ensuring that students are engaged in learning experiences that support development of portrait of a graduate learning outcomes. So really focusing on developing students' critical and creative thinking skills, communication skills, collaboration skills, and specifically, our application will really be targeted on extending portrait of a graduate presentations of learning. And those are opportunities for authentic assessments using a portfolio-based assessment process where students have an opportunity to reflect on their own development of Portrait of a Graduate skills and present evidence and demonstration of those skills and their growth over time. The second and the third goal of our application represents an extension really of the use of local performance assessments that the state has allowed during the pandemic in lieu of SOLs. So we currently this year have flexibility in social studies in grade 4, grade 8, high school, and 8th grade writing to use local assessments that we create in Fairfax in our classrooms in lieu of the SOLs. And that's a really important flexibility that we've been granted and one that we want to extend into the future because we really do believe that authentic assessment practices are one of the best ways to measure student learning. SOLs, multiple choice standardized assessments, are not the only way and not the best way to measure student learning. Really what we want to look at is multiple ways to measure student learning. So we want authentic examples of where students can show their work through writing samples, through presentations, through projects, through experiments, through demonstrations. And that's a much deeper way to demonstrate learning and actually gives teachers more actionable information about what students know, what they can do, and what additional support that they might have moving forward. Also, this flexibility would give us another extension of opportunities for students at the high school level to earn locally awarded verified credits. So as you know, students have to verify their credits through assessment processes at the high school level. This would give students another opportunity and option to do that, which would support our on-time graduation efforts. So moving forward, I just want to tell you, catching up to the slides here just a little bit about our application and how, if we could actually go back one, I apologize, and how our application really is focused on emphasizing authentic assessment practices, which really is a key practice to drive equitable learning outcomes. And we've chosen this focus because we really do believe that what we assess, how we assess, and how we use the data of assessment really determines what instruction looks like in the classroom. And there's a lot of evidence to show that performance assessment is really a driver for instructional improvement and educational equity and cultural responsiveness. So there's just a few examples from the research that I'd like to share to support that premise, which, for example, performance assessment provides learners with creative ways to really demonstrate their learning and show more depth of understanding. We know from research that performance assessment provides more information and robust and actionable information about student learning. We also know that performance assessment provides more information that's in alignment with workforce readiness skills than standardized assessments do. And most importantly, perhaps, performance assessment really elevates student voice. And in the research, we know that students who feel engaged and have a voice in school are 7 times more likely to be academically successful and academically engaged in school. So our innovation practices in this particular application are in alignment with our Portrait of a Graduate, which have been values in this system since 2015 when it was adopted. And the state adopted Profile of a Graduate about 3 years later. So we think that this is a way to really align our local division priorities to continue to push state policy and make sure that we are looking at additional ways to assess student learning. So in conclusion, I would just say, what is it that FCPS would get if our application is approved? What are the benefits and the gains to us? First, we would continue to really internalize and incentivize internal accountability around assessment practices in Fairfax to try new and different practices. We would have some additional relief from external assessment pressures. And I think it would send a very important message to our local community and to the state and perhaps the nation as well about our beliefs and values around effective assessment practices. So in conclusion, I would just say our application is due on May 3rd, which is about 10 days from now. So we've placed this item on the consent agenda for tonight's board meeting, and I'd be happy to address any questions that board members might have.
Thank you very much, Dr. Presidio. Board members wishing to speak, please go ahead and let me know. Ms. Tolan.
Thank you for the presentation. I know from for the last several years we've had in our strategic plan goals around this type of performance assessment, Portrait of a Graduate. I know we've made progress toward meeting those goals. How would you see this type of designation moving us? Does it help us move more quickly toward meeting some of those strategic goals that we have?
I think it does because it provides a little bit of relief from some of the additional external SOL pressures. So it gives us an opportunity to take some risks with some of those new practices, like our presentations of learning in those grade levels where those SOLs have been removed. So it's not asking teachers to do one more thing. We've taken something away and we're using a different practice instead. And I think that that can accelerate some of our work without adding additional workload that's already, as we know, too high.
And just one other quick question. Is this a new program? Is this the first time that we're applying for this?
So this is a program, I think it's in its second year now, and I'm not really sure how many applications the VDOE will receive. We don't really know much about the process. Of course, last year, the year that we're coming out of being a pandemic, so this is really kind of our first attempt to see, how our application might be received.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tolan. Ms. Eismoheiser?
Thank you. First, I'm really excited about this work because I know you and I have had many conversations about moving away from standardized testing and about portrait of graduate skills and performance assessments. So I have a couple questions. First of all, can this be used sort of down the road to having multiple pathways to a diploma in terms of having students have better access to being able to get verified credits through performance assessments and having the more flexibility to pursuing paths of areas of strength? Can this build to that work eventually?
I mean, that would be part of the hope. I mean, right now the application really is kind of limited in terms of our flexibility for where we can seek some of the assessment flexibility, so it's really limited at the high school level to social studies right now. Our advocacy would be to be able to demonstrate success with that, and then to continue to seek additional opportunity for flexibility in other content areas.
So then the other question I guess I have is that these presentations of learning, do you see room for those to be done in classes outside of some of our core academic classes right now? And it seems like in some of the classes I see there's academic content in terms of reading plays, for example, and doing projects in a theater class. Is there room for some of those assessments and then some of that data to be used as part of this project or future projects?
Yeah, honestly, the best way I think that this works is for the students to really have a lot of choice and ownership around what evidence they bring to that evaluation process and that portfolio process. So, the schools that we've been working with and the teachers we've been working with, we really encourage a lot of student ownership and choice. So bringing things from the arts, bringing things from electives, and not just focused on core content classes.
And then are you, with these presentations of learning, kind of expanding some of these authentic learning and performance assessments, are you looking at these sort of across student groups? So are we using these in special education classes? Are we using these in advanced classes, gen ed, or is it specifically focused on certain student groups?
No, this would be something that we want to have for all of our students. And again, a lot of what we're talking about here are best practices for all students, but also essential practices for a lot of our more diverse student learners who need different ways to demonstrate their proficiencies, their skills, and for us to be able to recognize and celebrate their strengths.
Yeah, and I would encourage that. So I'm glad to hear that because I do think that whenever we have new initiatives that look at more authentic learning opportunities, that we make sure that we are consistent in offering those to the breadth of our students. So I appreciate hearing that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eismoheiser. Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes, Dr. Presidio, thank you for bringing this, and certainly at a very high macro level. I'm very supportive of this approach. I think I just have a couple of concerns as a veteran board member, and it really, I'll bring it to Dr. Brabrand. I'll say again, I know you are absolutely committed to partnering with our board, but when I see a letter from George Mason University dated April 1st endorsing this application, and we're sitting here as a board on April 22nd, getting a public presentation for the first time, and it's on consent agenda, which I know is a chair, vice chair decision. I'm just really uncomfortable with where we found ourselves here tonight, because this is something to celebrate, and I don't understand at the last school board meeting, we also really didn't have a heavy lift on our plate, and I just really feel like the board needed to have the 2 weeks for this to be presented, for us to be able to look at it, And then tonight, it should have been an action item, not a consent agenda item. And so I'm just trying to understand, how long did your team know that you guys were going to consider this, apply for it, and why did we find ourselves here tonight with literally a presentation and a consent agenda happening at the same time? Because I feel like there's a lot of different questions we want to ask to really wrap our arms around what this is going to mean for instruction in the fall.
Sure, Ms. McLaughlin. I would say, in the end, we work at chairs to try to determine the board agenda and where things are. From everything that we have heard working with this board, and I have heard working with this board over the last several years, the interest in doing innovation, particularly innovation away from just the SOLs, has been something I've heard again and again. Obviously, if you're uncomfortable tonight with consent, I defer that to your chair and the rest of your colleagues. So really, as Dr. Presidio said, this is the second year of a program we're still learning a lot about, but I do think Fairfax County Public Schools is the largest school system in the Commonwealth, needs to get its foot in the door to stay to the state. It's time to let local school districts innovate across the portrait of a graduate that, frankly, as you know, the prior board and my predecessor helped create and the state followed. Now we want more flexibility. To be honest, we would love to have applied for it last year. A few things got in the way of us really getting an application together. And one thing I'll just say about timing, with everything going on, and this month has been very, very busy, perhaps not with school board presentations, but certainly with administration, I wanted to make sure we had ample time to make sure our application was in by the deadline. There is an early decision going on necessarily with the state. There's not an early admissions process, but I wanted to be sure that we had our information in early to make sure the state knows our interest in wanting to pursue this path. But obviously, if the board wants more time to discuss, we can work with board leadership and determine the appropriate place to do that.
No, I appreciate that. I'm certainly not asking to set this aside, and this is an operational matter. But I did want to call this attention to my colleagues and to everyone really in the shared work we do. I think it's problematic that something, as I see, is important and also something for us to, again, be partners in it. If George Mason has a letter dated April 1st, it means George Mason knew about this in March in order to produce that letter. And I just think that the board should be finding out on April 22nd about the division's desire to apply for something like this. I certainly support the innovation piece, but I guess to my colleagues, what I would say is I hope we will direct the superintendent. We very much want you to, as this proceeds, any change that this would have in the way in which we assess and instruct our students, will need to know. The application's fine, but how this then impacts our kids. And finally, to something that other board members already raised, this can't be that suddenly our teachers have, the key word here was performance assessments. Touring our schools and seeing 30 kids in a classroom is, that's a lot of kids. So I think we're going to need to dig a little bit deeper in understanding what a performance assessment means, because it is certainly faster and easier, we know, sadly, to do things where it's a multiple choice test. So there's just a lot that we won't be able to fix tonight. I do know you all come at this with good intentions, but I really hope in the future we won't be finding out sort of what feels like the 11th hour. So I thank you for your answers tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Just a reminder to everyone, every item on the consent agenda can be pulled for consideration at a later time, and we're happy to do so if that is your request this evening. So just let me know whenever you're ready. Our next speaker is Ms. Corbett Sanders.
Yes, and Dr. Presidio, I want to thank you for taking my call earlier today. So you answered many of my questions. However, I did have some thoughts subsequent to that because of the promise of this opportunity. And the promise is that it's more individualized learning for all of our students in the, especially in the social studies curriculum. And we've heard over the years that we are concerned that our students are not learning enough about civics and about our social studies curriculum because of the advent of the SOLs. So moving away from the SOLs and looking at more individualized learning, it seems to me that it aligns very closely to the IB approach of a portfolio. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, I mean, I think the general idea with this is that similar, I guess I would say, to the International Baccalaureate Assessment System, that you're looking at actual authentic samples of student work, not multiple choice answers that you provide on a standardized assessment. So it could be a writing sample, it could be a research paper that someone has done, it could be a presentation that a student has given, but looking at those authentic samples of student work.
So does this give our teachers and our students more of an opportunity to take advantage of what I call the natural resources of being in Fairfax County, the proximity to Washington, D.C., the proximity to some of our historic properties, and to be able to do more primary research and exploration?
Absolutely, it could do that. I mean, I think the limitations really are just in terms of, you know, student choice, interest, and time to complete assignments. But choice is really one of the driving factors here. So students have a lot of different opportunities to pursue how they're going to demonstrate their learning in different ways. And we know that that's a motivator for students, and it's one of the most important things that we can do to support students, both with unique learning needs that need some of those choices and opportunities, and students that have maybe been disengaged or disenfranchised from the, you know, the learning environment with a more traditional learning experience.
So what are you going to do from the professional development perspective to ensure that our teachers tap into those natural resources?
And I think, you know, what we would really advise and have been, you know, working under the assumption, which is in our application, that this would be something that we would continue to support teachers really in scaffolding this in. And there's ways to do this and ways to start that aren't overwhelming. But again, I think, you know, we are coming out of a pandemic. Stress levels and workload levels are at an all-time high, and we need to understand that, recognize that, and we need to move pretty slowly with this process. But we do have a very robust professional development support system that we've provided as we've been working with schools on this in the past. We've got about 36 different schools we've been partnering with over the last couple of years around presentations of learning. Presentations of learning are actually in the strategic plan. The division's strategic plan is one of our key measures. So we have been kind of going slowly at that, and I think we need to continue to move slowly and scaffold in these experiences for teachers and kids.
Well, thank you. I think it's great, and I actually think it will be liberating for both our teachers and our students to be able to move away from the standardized testing. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Ms. Marin.
Yes, thank you. Over here. Thank you, Dr. Presidio. You know, I first do want to comment on Ms. McLaughlin's point. I think it's a fair point. I also think that it's helpful to try new strategies to streamline our work because we have so much. So I see both sides. But I do support it, and I support it because I support doing something different than standardized testing. Standardized testing is a holdover from No Child Left Behind, started in 2002, that was designed to defund public education. It was designed to make vouchers available, take money, do choice. That is my experience from working in the U.S. Department of Education during that law's enactment. So I think that this kind of innovation is exactly what we should be championing in Fairfax County, and I hope that, or I would expect that our communications team is there to make sure that this is a possible solution to standardized testing, and also that our legislative advocacy this year, when we update our legislative agenda in the fall, thoroughly reflects this approach in that advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marin. Ms. Pekarsky?
Thank you, Dr. Presidio. I just quickly wanted to say thank you. This is exciting work. I mean, authentic assessments really is a best practice in education, and, you know, giving our students ownership of their learning That's very powerful, and it gives them an opportunity to really develop their metacognitive skills, which is really what we're going for at the end of the day as we, try to develop these portrait of a graduate skills. So I'm excited about this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing that there are no other speakers, I will take a turn. First of all, I am highly excited by this endeavor. It is reminiscent of, at least to me, of the professional learning model by the Dufours, and I wonder, is that how you're seeing it too? Rather, not just for the school, but rather for the entire division, where you're just reflecting on your practices in the effort of continuous improvement. Am I making a similar analogy here?
I think that you are. I mean, for folks in the community that don't know, I mean, a lot of that work is about improving, educators' professional practice through collaboration and through reflection. And I think that's a similar, analogy, I guess, if you will, to what we're doing here. We want students to reflect on, their own learning outcomes and set new learning targets and new learning goals that they can use to continue their progress and to have teachers better able to target support too.
Okay, terrific. I have a few other questions. I did see the letter regarding the partnership with George Mason. Is that a required part of the application, or is just the extra piece that we've added to strengthen our application?
Yeah, thank you, and thank Ms. McLaughlin for that as well. I apologize, I didn't mention that in the presentation. So all of the applications are required to have a university partner. And we're very fortunate to have a number of university partners that we work with, both in the state and out of the state, but we work most closely with George Mason, and we meet on a regular basis with them, at least on a monthly basis, around really a portfolio of collaboration projects that we have together. So they were probably the best partner that we thought was situated for this particular project, and they were happy to provide a letter of support.
And that partnership would involve what exactly? Is it the creation of alternate assessments? Is it the evaluation of the plan? What does this mean exactly?
Yeah, and to some degree that's still to be determined. But like I said, we meet on a regular basis and review portfolio of our collaboration projects. So we would add this to that portfolio. We would ask for their technical assistance in looking at our approach, both our professional development approach to the work, as well as monitoring our progress. As I mentioned, we'd have to report to the state every year in terms of our growth towards our goals, so they could provide consulting services, technical assistance in both of those capacities.
Thank you. On slide 6, you talked about the pathway to relief from external assessments, and I know we didn't get a chance to see it, but my notes identify it.
Sure.
Can you say a little bit more in terms of which assessments this is going to provide relief from? You mentioned something with writing in 8th grade. I'm sorry, was it in 5th grade? But I didn't get the specifics that this application would provide some flexibility with.
So if approved, this application would extend the flexibility that we've had under the waiver this year for use of local performance assessments this year in social studies at grade 4, grade 8, and then at the high school level for social studies courses, as well as grade 8 writing.
I'm sorry, repeat that again. Social studies grade 4.
Grade 8 and high school social studies, as well as grade 8 writing.
Okay, thank you for that. Authentic assessments, I think, are best, and as Ms. Pekarsky said, it's definitely best practice because it really evaluates the application of the learning, not just regurgitation of information on a standardized assessment. However, the standardized assessment, the comfort it does offer to some of our families is the fact that there is an intentional look at all of the subgroups. When we do engage in the local assessments, do we have that same approach where we are going to review the performance of students in each of the subgroups that are typically identified in your SOLs, your more standardized evaluations?
Yeah, we have the ability to do that. We've been doing that, and I guess what I would refer to as our pilot project that we've been working on for presentations of learning. So we are able to look at overall division trends as well as disaggregated subgroup trends and, of course, individual performance. So.
Okay. Thank you. My last question is regarding something that was very early on in the presentation regarding current methods and strategies. The conversation as of late has been regarding reading. How do you see that dovetailing into this opportunity where we're talking about K-3 literacy, and now we're applying for this additional flexibility. Talk to me if you can. I know this is probably a little bit of a shot in the dark here. Where do you see some intersectionality with that work?
Well, I'm not sure that I see a lot of intersectionality with that work right now. This application, you know, again, the latitude for how school divisions would choose what goals to include in their application was quite broad. So we looked at kind of two major criteria when we were determining what we wanted to focus on. There's a number of things that we could have focused on, of course, in our application, but we looked at the portrait of a graduate, which is really the outcome that we've established beyond state expectations for student learning, and an area that we know that we have a lot of growth to make in our school system as it pertains to equity. So that was one of the major goals that we chose for this particular application. The other was to extend some of the current state flexibility beyond this year as a best practice and something that we would like to continue to grow in terms of flexibility. That doesn't mean that we don't have a lot of other improvement efforts underway. And certainly, we have a lot of work that we know that we need to do that we're engaged in right now around our literacy program. I spoke a little bit to that earlier this week in the work session. I had some questions about, what we're doing in our summer program, how that extends to some of our literacy improvement efforts that we see beyond summer and into next year. And I would just say again that there is a lot of work to do there. We know coming out of the pandemic that we need to make sure that all of our students are continuing to receive the support that they need to read on grade level, particularly students that have been most impacted and affected by the pandemic. So we are doing a lot of curriculum work, professional development work this summer, and that will be a major strategic initiative of ours coming out of the pandemic into next year. We need to make additional changes to our curriculum as well as our professional development moving forward to make sure, particularly at the early grades, K through 3, that all of our students are receiving effective instruction in phonemic awareness and phonics, as well as the other domains of literacy like fluency and comprehension. So I don't necessarily see this particular work intersecting with that work, but I do see them on parallel tracks at this time.
Okay, fair enough. I actually had the same notes regarding phonics and phonemic awareness as kind of not necessarily a new method, but a more intentional method in the instruction of literacy here. Last question is regarding timeline. You mentioned that the application is due May 1st. When do you expect to hear back regarding acceptance? And furthermore, what happens once that happens? Are you on the clock to begin things? Are we in a space where we can produce these assessments, these robust assessments, in a timely enough manner? Can you give me some sense of what that would entail?
So the information we have on the timeline is that VDOE will review the applications and they'll make their recommendations to the board, the State Board of Education, on July 22nd. And at that meeting, we understand that the board would vote, and we should know after that time whether or not we had been selected for this designation. And then after that, we don't know exactly what the timeline would look like in terms of additional information, technical assistance, possibly some opportunities to pursue some additional funding resources in collaboration with the state. We just don't know. There's not a lot of information about that. I'm not too worried about the work because, again, this application is based on work that we're already doing that we want to continue. We want to expand into more schools. So we already have resources prepared and ready to go.
Thank you. And I guess one last thing. I lied. The last thing was not it. When we're speaking about replacing some of those assessments, Virginia Studies in grade 4 is also one of the big ticket items. Speaking to Ms. McLaughlin's point, we really need to be sure that there's clear, first, awareness of our parent community that this is going to be a change. I'm just slightly concerned about that. I think that's it for my questions. Are there any? Ms. McLaughlin, please go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Anderson as well.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, wait.
I apologize. I did not look down at my computer screen. Ms. Dernak-Kofax, why don't you go ahead, and then we'll have the go-backs shortly.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson, and you asked many of my questions. I do want to just make a comment that from the time we established the portrait of a graduate to our strategic plan, it was always our expectation to find alternate assessment pathways, and we've had to work with the state to get this done. So, Dr. Presidio, I commend you for completing this application during this most exciting year that we have been in. I since you've kind of outlined that the time frame for approval and what will happen, I do want to say I am hopeful that if we do get approved, that we will have a more a robust opportunity with a work session to better understand this, as well as to offer community engagement, because as many of my colleagues have stated, this is something that we have been looking for. These authentic assessments have been looking for and asking for. So I want to make certain that people appreciate what's been going on, but people really understand it. And I, as a board member, and I don't want to take away from the good things that this is, but it is a bit frustrating because it's comprehensive. There's lots, there's a 32-page document attached. So we unfortunately, weren't able to engage in a way with multiple questions that I would like, but most of my overarching questions have been asked. So I would just make that suggestion to your leadership team and to our board chair and vice chair, that if this is approved, we take a deeper dive into this as a board. And thank you for doing this.
Thank you, and we'd be happy to do that. And one other thing that I could offer in the future, in the past, we've done an educator share fair where folks come together and share the work that they're doing in their schools and their classrooms and share the student work. We've had some board member participation in the past. That's another great opportunity to learn more about the work, so we'd be happy to do that as well.
Yeah, just alert us to that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ms. Derna-Kofas. Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes, I'm sure some colleagues wish I wouldn't have a go back, but I am just increasingly more concerned as we listen, because there's no doubt this is the direction, the goal we want to go towards. But what troubles me is, Dr. Presidio mentioned this work that we're already doing. And I mean, part of me wants to say to my colleagues, can you all take a quiz right now on what school's doing this work? What does the work look like? How is it, what are we seeing from it? I mean, I feel like the more we're here tonight, the more we're learning about stuff that the board should already know. And so I really don't want to keep hammering at that, but I want to reinforce what Ms. Derna-Kofas said, and I really want to thank our chair, Dr. Anderson, because you too asked a lot of really great questions that were just swirling in my mind from all of this, because the intent and the goal is phenomenal, and Ms. Marin said it too. But I've been around long enough that one of my concerns always is, how do we actually implement? What does the execution look like? And when I first joined the board, there was a pilot study being done in one of my high schools, and it hadn't been pilot tested. It affected grading and assessing, and the parents were taken by a major surprise, and it had to do with honors biology. And high school grades matter, as we know, for college admissions. And it just was a well-intentioned pilot, but it had not been vetted. There had been way too much freedom given at the principal-teacher level, and there was a lot of cleanup work that had to happen, including really upset community. And so when you mention that we're already doing this work, how vast is this work we're doing? Is it just a few schools within our 200? Is it across all 200 schools? And what is it that is actually, to the breadth and depth, is already here?
Yeah, no, those are really good questions, and I appreciate it. A few things I would say, and of course we would be happy to do a work session if the board would like to have a work session, and you could hear from even folks that are actually doing this work in their schools, which would be great. I know folks would be very excited to share that information with the board. When I say that this is work that we're already doing, the Portrait of a Graduate presentations of learning are in the strategic plan as the board approved metric of how we're measuring Portrait of a Graduate outcomes for students. So we've been working with pilot schools that signed up to take on some of that work and work with central office specialists to really try to figure out what would that assessment process look like? How would we really measure a student's critical thinking skills? And how could we do that well, and what would that look like? And one of the things that we came up with was the portfolio process that I've talked about. And we've been pilot testing some of those assessment instruments, doing some of the data analysis that we think that we can scale up to more schools. Now, we have about 30 schools that have participated in some of that pilot work, but it's really just a few teachers in each of those schools. So the sample that we have at this point in time is really still pretty small. And normally where the board would hear about that work is in the presentation of Goal 1 on the strategic plan. But of course this year those presentations were redacted and we didn't provide as much detail as we had in the past, just due to scheduling issues related to return to school, work session time, and other priorities. So I think that's probably why board members wouldn't recollect hearing about some of that, because it's really been over a year now that we've had an opportunity to share that work. But again, we'd be happy to talk more about it in a work session. And then also individual board members that would like to have conversations, we'd be happy to do that with individual board members as well.
Now, I appreciate that, because interestingly that you connected that for me. I did have families reach out to me and ask, Megan, what's this new Portrait of a Graduate assessment? My child's teacher is saying they're going to be graded on Portrait of a Graduate, and as one of the board members who helped usher that into the school system, it took me by surprise too, because Portrait of Graduate is the skills we want in all of the content areas, not that there's actually like a testing and a quizzing of, are you a Portrait of a Graduate? So that already had concerned me, because we want that out of our students just as learners in general, and doing the whole testing thing again.
Well, the process we have is not a test.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we refer that to as an authentic assessment process, and there's a couple different methods we use for that. One is the portfolio process, where students collect evidence of their growth as communicators, collaborators over the year, and they reflect, and we have a reflection process for them to identify their strengths and areas of growth in each of the attributes of Portrait of a Graduate. Others are through presentations of learning, so tying the Portrait of a Graduate skills to content that the students are learning in a class, and that might have been where the grading came in terms of the content from the class, also associated with the integration of the Portrait of a Graduate skills. So I think that's probably what that person was referring to.
I know in June we hear there's post-SOL, post-AP and IB exams, and there's the fatigue. And so we've talked about how do you make June a really dynamic, robust learning, and that to me would be where it's more of an assessment, but not this.
It's a culminating
the intensity of everything always feels like it's about striving toward a letter grade for especially our high school kids. So I won't take up any more time, but I do appreciate all the information you're giving us here this evening. I really do hope in the future, though, that we won't find ourselves in a business meeting, getting this presentation, and that's not on you at all. That's for me to talk with our superintendent and our chair and vice chair to figure out where the disconnect was, because I think this is almost at the core of what I would hope our board does. And just again, we're going to need that work session so that we do our due diligence to make sure how this gets translated into the classroom learning. But I do want to applaud you all for the passion and the commitment of what you're doing here.
Well, I appreciate that, and next time if we do a work session, I'll bring more information. I'll actually bring the right slides as well, so that might help.
Certainly. Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Thank you, Dr. Presidio. I also think there's space here to mention that we are still in the application process. You may not be accepted.
Correct. That's correct.
That could happen. But if you are successful, we should certainly have a more robust discussion in terms of what that entails. As a parent of a 6th grader and a 3rd grader, I see very routinely some of the PBL activities that happen in the school. Honestly, I haven't seen so much this year, but in years past, it's been something that I've looked forward to. And also as an educator, this is always something that I gravitate to, because it really allows kids the opportunity to analyze their learning and not just state dates and facts, because then it doesn't really mean much to them. I did have one last question that I think I skipped, and now I cannot find it, but in the interest of time, I am going to let it go. I thank you, colleagues, for your questions on this. I don't see any other hands to speak on this matter. Thank you, Dr. Presidio, and best of luck to you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
The next item on our agenda is 3.04, Student Rights and Responsibilities. Dr. Brabrand, please provide the introduction.
Thank you, Chairman Anderson. Now, a couple of things. We have a work session for this SR&R coming up, just to put that out right out of the gate. So we're doing a presentation. We have a work session coming, and then there'll be a vote really in a little over a month, so that there's plenty of time to see the SR&R. One of the things I just want to set the table with, if we can rewind time, remember we had a long work session and school board meeting just as the pandemic was starting to take place about SR&R. We made a lot of changes with this board's direction, but you're going to see when Dr. Boyd shows you the number of incidents this year, because so much of the year was virtual, is 98% less than the years before. We're talking 30 or 40,000 behavior incidences logged and 600 this year. So this year, the work that we did in SR&R, the work that you did and we worked together in partnership, really hasn't had a chance to be fully digested because we didn't have that classroom experience and that data. We are going to be taking all of those changes and really working hard with some additional tweaks, some feedback some board members gave, a little bit of feedback from the General Assembly to help us tweak some of the major changes that were made in the SR&R last year. And then we really hope a year from now, we'll be able to come back with some robust data about the impact of the SR&R changes made to help reduce disproportionality in discipline for our students and really create that caring culture. Now, Dr. Boyd is here, our Assistant Superintendent for Special Services. She's here virtually and she'll be here in person in the future for her presentations, and her and her team will be going through it. And I would just say again, it's the presentation tonight. We know that there's sometimes a need for a question or two, but we do have a full work session plan, multiple hours, because we know how important this work has been to the board and to the community as we move forward to continue to reform not just our SR&R, but really push a whole new way of how we look at school discipline and address disproportionality. So Dr. Boyd, I'm going to turn it over to you and your team, and thank you for your hard work. Dr. Boyd.
Thank you, Dr. Brabrand, and good evening, all. As Dr. Brabrand shared, this evening we are going to be providing you with an overview of the revisions made to Regulation 2601, which is our students' rights and responsibilities that's proposed for the 21-22 school year. In order to ensure we provide the breadth and depth of the discussion due to this very important topic, the following persons are present to assist in responding to questions and to provide feedback. Deb Scott, Director of the Office of Intervention and Prevention Services, John Foster, Division Counsel, Liz Noto, Principal of Herndon High School, Cindy Conley, Principal of Irving Middle School, and Marie Lamont, Principal of Bailey's Upper Elementary School. This presentation, as we look at our next slide in our agenda, this presentation will provide background information as it relates to Regulation 2601, which include general updates based on board feedback, state legislative requirements, changes made to ensure alignment with the state model guidance, division-wide behavior, referral implementation, and proactive supports, and we will conclude with the timeline for approval. Regulation 2601, or the Students' Rights and Responsibility, which is often referred to as the SR&R, is aligned with the Virginia Board of Education model guidance for positive and preventive code of student conduct policy and alternatives to suspension, and is reviewed each year and approved by the school board. The SR&R describes students' rights and responsibilities in order to foster a responsive, caring, and inclusive culture where all feel valued, supported, and hopeful, and where every child is reached, challenged, and prepared for success in school and in life. As Dr. Brabrand shared earlier, significant changes were made to the 2020-2021 SR&R, such as the hybrid distribution model, alignment of the dress code with the State Dress Code Equity Act, implementation of the new Student Behavior and Administrative Response, or SBAR codes, leveled behavior response charts, reflective considerations for disciplinary practices flow chart for administrators, and limiting police reporting requirements. The changes to the 2020-2021 regulation were presented to the Minority Student Achievement Oversight Committee, the Advisory Committee for Students with Disabilities, and the Title I Advisory Committee with the opportunity to provide feedback, ask questions, and make recommendations for improvement. As we look at the next slide, the total number of behavior incidents entered to date during the 2020-21 school year, as Dr. Brabrand shared this evening, is significantly impacted by our COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, the impact of the most recent changes to our SR&R are not fully known. Due to the phased return of our in-person instruction in response to COVID-19 and the limited ability to implement the SR&R with our full school complement, there has not been significant changes to the 21-22 SR&R to allow for sufficient time for implementation of the current changes. Data trends and impact will be closely monitored once the division resumes 5 days of in-person instruction in the upcoming school year. We'll now take a look at the chart displayed on this slide, which shows the total number of behavior incidents entered into the student information system over the past 4 years. The data entered for the 3 quarters for this year equals less than 3 days of behavior incidents entries for a traditional school year or pre-pandemic year. The standards of accreditation changed at the beginning of the 2018-2019 school year. This is one of the reasons for the spike in behavior incidents in our student information system, as administrators were more frequently documenting truancy interventions. This increase in the documentation impacted the total number of incidents, causing a substantial increase in the 18-19 and 19-20 school years. More detailed data points and notes were recently shared with the board and the public in the Brabrand briefing dated March 19, 2021. We will now look and review updates to the SR&R based on school board feedback from the SR&R approval process this past summer and changes that are necessary to align the regulation with the current policy and practice. Next slide, please. The language has been edited throughout the document to reflect gender neutrality, specifically removing references to he, she, and his or her, and replacing it with they, their, or the student. Each section in Chapter 1 has been clearly outlined as a right or a responsibility. Next, the title of Chapter 2 has been changed to more clearly align with the order and the content of the chapter, in which the current title is Acts for which students may be disciplined, disciplinary procedures, and interventions. And finally, throughout Chapter 2, language has been expanded to minimize the use of the words inappropriate or disruptive. Language around the school resource officer's primary role in schools has been expanded, and examples of safety concerns have been provided. We can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. School resource officer's primary role in schools has been expanded, and examples of safety concerns have been provided, and definition of aggravating circumstances have been added to the suspension of students in grades K through 3 in the paragraph in Chapter 2 to ensure clarity. Title IX language and codes have been moved from the addendum into the main document, along with information on retaliation to align with current federal requirements and Regulation 2118. The topics of racially charged language and slurs toward marginalized groups, to include those in the gender expansive community, are addressed in the regulation and throughout our policy and practice in FCPS. However, we will be editing language to emphasize the need to address slurs and hate speech through level interventions more prominently within the SR&R, and noting with more focus that these behaviors cause harm to others. As a result of our ongoing collaboration with stakeholders, additional revisions are pending to further clarify when school administrators are to make reports to law enforcement, reinforce the rights and responsibilities outlined in the SRNR, and corresponding interventions and consequences apply when engaging in school-sponsored activities on and off FCPS grounds to include athletics, clarify that persons can opt out of having directory information released without consent, and expand on how professional development or training on the SRNR is provided to all stakeholders, to name a few. As we look at our next slide, we're going to look and notice that, just very briefly, this year we did not have to make any changes to our SRNR based on outcomes from the 21 legislative session. Next slide, please. We'll now look at model guidance. FCPS implemented the student behavior and administrative response codes this school year and has anecdotally seen a benefit of focusing behavior conversations on the impact of behavior on the learning environment and addressing it with a level response that includes appropriate sanctions and interventions. Per the Virginia Department of Education, additional codes have been added to the SBAR data collection to reflect persistently dangerous behaviors that require a referral to the division superintendent and additional documentation for state reporting. These codes have been added as Category 6, which have the highest impact in the code charts and require referral to the division superintendent. These codes will be used across the Commonwealth by all school divisions next school year and will provide consistency and transparency within our data collection. For the focus of the 21-22 school year, as we return to buildings 5 days per week to reestablish our Tier 1 or universal routines and expectations while providing proactive social-emotional support for our students. As we look at our next slide, we'll look at our data collection and proactive support. In addition to reinforcing universal Tier 1 expectations, FCPS will implement a division-wide online behavior referral system in the fall. Paired with our teacher and administrator training to support Tier 1 implementation of this division-wide referral system will provide more accurate data at the classroom, school, region, and division level. The behavior incidents entered into the online system will populate the multi-tiered systems of support workflow in the student information system, which will provide a school-level dashboard for easy access to data that is updated each night, which will assist us in developing targeted plans for ongoing improvement. Finally, the current timeline for approval for the SRNR, or Students' Rights and Responsibilities, includes a work session on May 4th and action on June 17th. We look forward to ongoing collaboration with stakeholders, and we thank you in advance for your feedback. At this time, I turn it back over to you, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you so much, Dr. Boyd. I know that we have a work session coming up for this presentation, and so the questions may not be forthcoming, and I do not see any at this time from my colleagues. I do see one comment by Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
Madam Chair, my hand is raised.
Thank you, ma'am. I apologize. I keep forgetting to look at the screen today because so many of us are in the room. My apologies, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. I'll get back with you as soon as Ms. Corbett-Sanders is completed.
Actually, my comments are related to the slide that says that you've made changes based on board input. Does that mean changes have been made to the draft already, and that a new draft will be posted in advance of our work session?
Thank you so much for your question, Ms. Corbett-Sanders. The changes reflected on the print slides are changes that were based on feedback from the board on last summer, but some of the description and the narrative that I shared was based on some of our collaboration in the recent days that will be updated and provided and shared with board members prior to our next work session as we continue to collaborate. However, I did want to share that information with the board now as some things that we are planning on and have drafted some changes to within the last couple of days.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate a couple of items that you listed, in particular the extension of the language in the document to make sure that everybody knows that the SRNR also applies on our sports fields. so that there is very clear understanding of what is acceptable behavior and what is not. So I appreciate that. Additionally, Dr. Boyd, and I very much appreciate the amount of time you spent with me on the phone about this, were you able to get references to the state code on the requirement to report infringements of students bringing alcohol onto school property or marijuana usage?
So we're going to provide some updated information. We wanted to make sure that we didn't move too swiftly and identify the incorrect code. So we'll provide those updates for the board. And what we'll do if it pleases the board is that we can make sure that the questions and recommendations that you have, similar to what we did with the restraint and seclusion, we can identify what those recommendations were and highlight where those updates have been incorporated into the next update, so that it's very clear that your concerns and questions were addressed explicitly.
That is very helpful. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate your spirit of collaboration that you reached out to board members to identify any of our concerns. And that was just so welcome on my part. And I really look forward to this, the board discussion in more detail. I will let you know that I raised these issues last year, and I continue to be concerned about the school to prison pipeline potential when we turn information over to the police on minor infractions by our students. The other area, and I'm just letting my board colleagues know, I have concerns about the language on marijuana usage and how that meshes up with the recent changes at the state level on the legalization of marijuana, and wondering why we would treat marijuana usage different than alcohol, because they are now treated the same by the state. And so thanks a lot. I really appreciate all you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corbett-Sanders. Ms. Keys-Gamarra?
Thank you. Just give me a moment to get my camera on. Okay. All right. Well, first of all, I do appreciate all this work, Dr. Williams. I'm sorry I wasn't able, one of the people who got a chance to speak to you, but for my fellow board members as well as yourself, I wanted to identify the areas of concern that I will be raising at the work session. Of course, this is a living document. We're constantly working on continuous improvement. So the first area of concern is really, I think there is some work that needs to be done to make sure that the language is focused on reaching students. When I read the document, I get the sense that we're notifying administrators, which is great. They need to certainly understand what their authority is. But I do think that there needs to be greater clarity with respect to actual notice to students and parents. For example, the intersectionality between cyber responsibility and what can happen with those violations. We use the word obscene material, which is not defined in our definitions. And given the fact that we have students very early, 4th grade, 5th grade, etc., having a phone, I think it's important that we work on that language. I also want to make sure we understand those discretionary areas and how professional development can help make sure that we're implementing these things with fidelity to avoid those disparities. The second area of concern really comes from a lot of discussion with young people, with our students, about how SROs are included in our school environment. I previously had a forum topic that I put on hold because we were focusing on return to school. I do plan to reactivate that so that we can make sure that, given the most recent and things that we've gone through in the past year, we certainly want to recognize how students are feeling and have a more complete discussion about supervision of SROs, the boundaries of how they are a nexus to criminal involvement, and making sure that we really are focusing on restoration. And then my final concern has to do with our special education students. Our special education students, and making sure that we have the clarity that we need there as well. So thank you so much, and I'll be more, I realize we're going to discuss this in a work session, and so these will be the areas that I look forward to discussing with you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Ms. Keys-Gamarra.
Thank you.
And we look forward, my apologies.
Thank you. Mr. Frisch.
But did she have a response? I'm sorry, I would love to hear it.
Dr. Boyd, did you have a comment?
I was just going to share that we look forward to following up and having some really detailed conversation. I know we are only able to get through some of the topics here, and I apologize for not being able to have in-depth conversations, but we do plan on having very detailed discussions with each of you as we work through this document, because we know it takes a lot of collaboration and partnership. So I've made note of your concerns, but I look forward to talking with you further.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Frisch?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Boyd. I want to thank you for meeting with Ms. Marin and I earlier. I think it was this week. It's a bit of a blur. And talking to us about what more we can do within the SR&R to address the use of hate speech. And I look forward to having further conversations about how we work that out. I know it's a tightrope in terms of how we can police this and make sure that students are not being harmed by it. So if you'd like to add any comments to that based on our conversation or any thinking you've done since then, I'd love to hear it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Frisch. We've talked as a team, and we really want to make sure that I know when we talked in our small group that we've identified things relative to hate speech as it relates to racial slurs, identity, expression, and a number of things. And we want to make sure that we really bolster that information. We know part of it is going to be around professional development, and one of our public speakers noted that on this evening about really educating and doing that piece. So we know that it's going to need to be twofold: the educational piece and working in collaboration with our equity office, and also how we strengthen our language within the SR&R so that all stakeholders understand the importance of really making sure that everybody feels welcome in our school community.
Right. You know I'm not the only school board member who has spoken to many students who talk about hearing things, seeing them go, and not even reporting them because they think nothing will happen. So I think anything we can do to crystallize the school division's stance on the issue will be helpful. I also appreciated Mr. Rigby's comments about changing the culture in our schools because teenagers are teenagers. They're not going to report everything. And so we need to do our best not only to provide consequences when warranted, but also to provide a culture that is conducive to an environment that doesn't include hate speech. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin?
Thank you. I know we'll have a work session on this and be able to dive more deeply in it. I would first ask if there's been any just consideration of how much time we'll be able to have for this work session, because years past, this is a really important area of concern and focus for the board, and so I want to make sure we plan for sufficient time. Some years we've even had to have 2 work sessions because the breadth of the work was so much that it couldn't all get done in one work session. So I would just suggest that maybe talking with Dr. Boyd and Superintendent Brabrand to gauge the amount of time. Another option is, Dr. Brabrand, you did a fantastic job on recent issues with this board where 2 by 2 you met with us to really kind of flesh out where board input needed to be, and that might also be another consideration. I just want to echo something that my colleague, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, said. It's so important that we work on definitions so that students really understand what things are. Oftentimes, they just don't realize that in their own teen behavior. And in particular, I am very concerned about texting and sexting, and So I want to make sure we really go to that. We've also had cases in the past where, particularly middle school, when boys and girls are learning to interact with those that they are attracted to, and sometimes they think they're flirting, and it ends up not being received that way, or it's crosses the line, but intent versus not intent is going to be important there. And then in terms of our SROs in schools, I know our nation is having a lot of conversation about how we best utilize law enforcement. And as someone who has for years talked about that, our SROs can be a very positive presence because we want to build for children this sense of understanding the partnership that happens in having a safe and secure environment, and that law enforcement isn't always there just to find you doing something bad, but to be there as a source of support, and those are positive lessons. However, I'm also mindful as a social worker that traditionally our police officers are taught to prevent harm from happening, and they haven't in their training been given all of the other social, emotional rounding out of the population they're going to work with. And in this particular situation, it's with children. And I'm proud of the board's legacy for now almost a decade in wanting to make sure that our student discipline practices are focused on discipline, which is to teach, to help students learn how to make good choices, and it's not about punishment. And that will be important for the role, and where we try to clarify what an SRO's role is and what it is not. But I feel the need to really emphasize as we tackle this really important issue, because the board of supervisors fund our SROs. And yet, you've heard me and others talk about why are we not as a county funding school nurses? When you think about what we invest in, where we put our money in, children being healthy so that they can then be best prepared to learn, if we're not investing in that, I struggle at times why we invest so much money in the SRO program and not in the school nursing program. So I know some might not see that as tangential and related, but I do think they're interconnected, because in our SR&R, and we talk about the role of SROs in our schools, at some point we have to be talking about, again, where is the role and the mission critical need, and how, if we reform that, then there are other benefits to how we best serve and wrap around the supports to our kids. I know it might seem as a little roundabout, but I still see the connection there. So thank you. And Dr. Boyd, I really do appreciate this. Is a lot for you to take on as you're learning about our system. And the SR&R, as many point out, is one of the most dense in public school systems. So there's a lot to learn just in that booklet alone.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin, and you're definitely correct. We had similar discussions with Dr. Brabrand regarding the importance of the SR&R and how much time it requires, and we actually had the same discussion regarding the 2x2s and phone calls to ensure that we were comprehensive and maximize the opportunity for discussions that we sometimes don't get in other forums. Ms. Merritt? You have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Boyd, this is a question for you, and perhaps also to you, Dr. Anderson, as our chair. Will we be discussing SROs and what to do with that program at our work session about SR&R? I think a forum had been maybe proposed. I can't recall now where we were, but I'd like clarity, please. Thank you.
Sure. I think the SROs were the forum topic that Ms. Keys-Gamarra just referred to, that she had put forward while we were still in pandemic and postponed into another time, and I'm sure that will come forward as she just shared. It is not an embedded part of the SRNR, but obviously it's a related topic. Dr. Boyd, did you want to add anything regarding your expectations on that conversation?
No, just that we're just happy to have the discussion and collaborate. We want to make sure that everyone is clear and that we're all working towards the same end. So we'll make sure that we follow up, and make sure that I'm very intentional to get with Ms. Keys-Gamarra to find out what we can do to support the forum or what support she might need from us for information.
Thank you. So I wanted to share this thought from my colleagues. So you know that I try to promote us being very thoughtful and planful in what we take on, and talking about SROs could be a very big topic, and we have lots of other big work on our plates. At the same time, I'm not understanding why we would need a forum topic to be proposed to talk about SROs if SROs are already in our SR&R policy, and can't that be part of the discussion at the work session? So it's a procedural question and also a question of bandwidth here, but we know that the community has been seeking our action on this or to have a conversation on it. It seems like the appropriate time. So I guess Chairman Anderson, perhaps you want to respond. I don't know, or colleagues want to respond.
I'm not sure if I have a different response, because I think the forum topic was geared towards a particular a slant, and so that wouldn't be necessarily what is provided here. I think, again, they're related. There's a space for that discussion, but I think Ms. Keys-Gamarra's forum topic was very specific, and that requires some board support for that to move forward.
Okay, well, I'll just leave that at that, but certainly would like to hear from colleagues either tonight or other time soon, and just what to expect in the discussion at the work session for the SR&R. Will we be discussing our thoughts on the SRO program? I think it's appropriate to discuss it there, and if we still have a forum topic, then that's great too, but it seems like a ripe opportunity and a parallel opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Omesh.
Thank you. Happy to follow Ms. Marin. Actually, I do think process-wise it might make sense if we're able to time the forum discussion, if we do decide to maintain it as a forum, so that it can inform our work in the SR&R. I mean, given the mentions in the booklet, there would have to be amendments if we do decide a certain path forward. But I understand that we have a work session coming up. I just wanted to flag 3 things in advance of that perhaps could be presented and useful information for us to consider. Number 1, I remember before Dr. Boyd, you joined us, Teresa Johnson had been talking about the system that we've now put in place to collect data differently in a more centralized way that allows staff to have more of a reflective look back as to decision making that's occurred on discipline. I think it might be beneficial to have an update on some of that and where we've come since that point. So that would be one ask. I have 3. My second is, constantly I think in these conversations, and I shared some of this even in our return to school work session, but as far as the SR&R goes, we're thinking kind of from a compliance-based perspective. What changes have come in the law? Has there some, what's the state forcing us to do? And here are the amendments we're going to make accordingly. I would love to be able to see, in this presentation, okay, there's the board feedback section, which, comes down to whatever we kind of come up with and think about from what we're hearing from constituents. Doesn't seem to be following a consistent process, a little bit arbitrary, but then we have, Virginia legislative changes, Virginia Board of Education model guidance, and that's what's informing the changes we're making in the document or in our policy. I'd love to see, Dr. Boyd, you're new to our system. I think in the opportunity you've had to really give this a thorough look, feedback that's beyond that. Let's think of the ways that we can improve upon what we have in, innovative, creative, whatever ways that we can perhaps move past ways of doing things that are no longer best practice or that are no longer, trauma-informed, etc. So that would be my second ask, is to think of our own FCPS thinking around how this could be modified. And finally, in light of a lot of what we've seen over the course of the year, I know some work has begun to address in a more serious way, what Mr. Frisch said about hate speech and such incidents. I'd love to see some, work alongside Dr. Williams, perhaps, in building out some of that accountability mechanism that we're hoping to see reflected at minimum as a learning moment from the past, but has always been warranted. Those are just three components I would love to see reflected in the work session. I don't know, Dr. Braybrand, if you have thoughts on some of that, but in moving us towards really kind of being visionaries ourselves rather than just making the tweaks every year that we're required to make by law anyway. No less responding to what we have seen to be very real on the ground circumstances and a national conversation that I would hope is at minimum an awakening.
Thank you, Ms. Omesh, and we certainly will make sure that we're using our data. The new online referral behavioral system that will be implemented on next year will really give us an opportunity to highlight areas that we're doing well and also areas that we're not doing well. And as we look at the behavior infraction, that's just what is that symptom. But we want to make sure that as we look at our data, that we're responding more to the manifestation of what's going on. So do we need more training and support for various stakeholder groups, our students, our families, our staff, our administrators on cultural responsiveness, as you said, trauma-informed schools, those various things. So I think that data will certainly help us to inform what our division needs, but also what are very school-specific needs as we move forward to really make sure we're not just doing compliance, but really outcome improvement for all of our schools.
One of the things, Ms. Omesh, I would just say too is Dr. Boyd and Dr. Williams and I will talk about how we can help work with the board. I know you're already doing some 2x2s, but so that we can maybe do a little work prior to the work session. I know there was mention of a second work session, but we may be able to do some individual work with board members so the work session that we already have scheduled will be rich, focused, and really make it feel like progress. And one thing I just want to say to the board and community, just a reminder, go back and look at the SR&R in 2017, prior to my arrival, and look at the SR&R now.
Bless you.
Look at the change in the SR&R in 4 years, what has been done. This is not the SR&R of old in Fairfax County Public Schools. We have together in partnership, because this was a priority of the prior board and this board, made a massive number of changes, working with the board, the leadership team, and working with our principals to make changes in how we create the caring culture. There's still more to do, there's no doubt about it. But I really believe we have been very proactive. We had board members actually join us down in Richmond as we went to these state conferences around disrupting what Ms. Corbett-Sanders talked about, that school classroom to courtroom pipeline. And I think we really, if you go back and look at an old SR&R document from just 3 or 4 years ago to now, you can see and feel the difference. And what we need to do is take that momentum of partnership that we've had and keep going with it, Ms. Omesh, as we move forward. So I look forward to the work session, and I really appreciate, again, Dr. Boyd, to you and Ms. Scott, a wonderful presentation tonight. Thank you for representing us so well.
Thank you, Dr. Braybrand. Ms. Tolan?
Yes, I just wanted to react to some of the questions that were brought up around should we tackle the topic of SROs within this work session. I guess thinking about, Ms. Bacarsi and I've already talked about being meeting managers for this particular session, the number of topics that people have just brought up tonight. And I think, although SROs is maybe a parallel topic to SR&R, it's also a huge topic. Karen Keys-Gamara and I have had a number of discussions. Dr. Braybrand and I have talked about it. It's a big topic. I mean, looking at expanding our MOU, maybe different training, different requirements, it's huge. So I think it warrants, the separate forum topic and a separate work session and discussions and community input all on its own. So just my 2 cents on moving forward with these topics.
Thank you, Ms. Tolan. Ms. Cohen?
Yeah, thank you. I definitely look forward to digging into this at our work session, but I did just want to flag,
an area of concern, and I would definitely be interested in having Dr. Williams speak to us as well. But I still remain concerned about how we're treating tardies, and really trying to dig into, in particular in elementary school, where those tardies are coming from, and making sure that we're not, in a punitive way, having kids bear the consequences for decisions that their parents make. And so, I think we've seen many times that tardiness is sometimes more of an indication of what's going on at home. And I recognize when we get to level 2, then we wind up with a consultation and look at some MTSS. But I'd like us to do a little bit deeper dive on how we deal with tardiness here.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. And now we'll have an opportunity for board members who'd like to speak again. We will start with Ms. Keys-Gamarra.
Thank you. I did want to respond to the comments and thank you, Ms. Tolan, for because we have talked about the whole SRO issue. If my colleagues may remember, when we discussed the SR&R last year, I also brought up concerns regarding SROs. And the position of the board at that time was that this was a discussion more focused on the SR&R and not SROs. And so I'm happy to address this any way that the board believes is appropriate, but I do not believe that this is something that is outside of our bandwidth. The concerns that our students are expressing, the concerns that we have heard repeatedly in the public arena, even just getting through this week, has been difficult for many of our students. And so I think we have to have this discussion. I'm happy to work with my colleagues on how we do this, but I believe that it has to be done. And so I look forward to hopefully getting this forum topic scheduled. I'm happy to, I probably will be revising the language from last year because a year has passed. But we do need greater clarification so that our students can feel safe, so that our parents have a greater clarity on what to expect, and we can go forward with the understanding of what we have learned in the last year. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Ms. Sizemore-Heiser.
Thank you. I'm not going to add too much to the discussion. I know we'll have a work session, and I look forward to, I love the idea of a 2x2 to really be able to dig into questions so we can save our work session for more robust discussion amongst the 12 of us and staff. I did have, and this doesn't need to be answered today, but just as we go forward, I am curious about the 635 incidences, and were those related to when we phase students back in person, or were those related to online? So I just want some more information on that, even for this year, and whether we need to have some analysis of those incidences and looking at our SRRs. I do agree with Ms. Keys-Gamarra and many of our colleagues. I think we need a very robust discussion about SROs, and I think it's going to be difficult to combine the two. So just for my chair and vice chair. The last question I wanted to talk about, Dr. Boyd, last year when we had these discussions with Ms. Johnson, we talked a lot about intent, and we talked a lot about protections for both IEP students and students with 504s. We talked about looking at issues of intent, especially for our special education students. So as we dig into the SR&R this year, that is something I'd want to sort of dig into a little bit more, as well as self-determination, because when we talk about hate speech and we talk about bullying and we talk about the relationship in our SR&R, we often rely on students either self-reporting or bystanders or champions reporting those incidences. And I think we need to do a good job with our students with disabilities, self-determination, and knowing what to look for and protecting themselves. And so, and also looking at intent when we're looking at behavior. So I just want to dig into some of those issues. I just want to put that out there for you as we move forward in this conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser. At this point, we will close this initial introduction of the SR&R, and we will prepare. Oh, we have another speaker. Ms. McLaughlin, please go ahead.
Because I know that this is new work for our board to be doing, I just want to make sure there is no misunderstanding of where I've been for the last 9 years. Even when we had some deeply tragic school shootings and there was community discussion about adding SROs into our elementary schools, I was vehemently against doing that. Again, I pressed the need for, we need to get school nurses in our schools before anything else. So for anyone who's taking my comments about trying to have a holistic discussion about SROs, I'm just trying to be respectful. I think that we need to have that respectful, holistic conversation on all counts, but I don't want anybody to take away for a moment that as a social worker, my focus has been, what do we need in our K-12 schools? And we need to first be having the therapeutic support services and healthcare services before we put police officers in schools, and that I've been consistent. So I wanted to make sure, as my colleagues, you guys know how strongly I stand on that.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. We are now going to sunset this part of the discussion as we have more plans for robust discussions and conversations during the work session next week. So thank you all, and thank you to Dr. Boyd for the presentation.
Thank you.
Agenda item 4.01, confirmation of action taken in closed meeting. I call on Ms. Corbett Sanders for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the annual contracts for the instructional personnel identified in closed meeting not be renewed for the 2021-2022 school year, according to the terms and conditions discussed in the closed session.
Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Pekarsky. All in favor? Ms. Corbett Sanders, Ms. Tolan, Ms. Pekarsky, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, Ms. McLaughlin, Mr. Frisch, Ms. Omesh, Ms. Cohen, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, Ms. Darnat Koufax, and myself. All opposed? Those abstaining? Ms. Marin. Thank you. Now I will turn it over to Ms. Pekarsky for the consent and new business items.
Thank you. Item 5, consent agenda. Our adopted rules of parliamentary procedure, Robert's rules, provide for a consent agenda listing several items for approval of the board by a single motion. Many items listed have gone through board review, and documentation has been provided to all board members and the public in advance. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member prior to the meeting. The consent agenda items are on the screen. Is there any objection to approving the consent agenda? Hearing and seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. Item 6, new business. The following are new business agenda items. There will not be a vote on these items tonight, but action is scheduled at a future meeting, and they are on the screen.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pekarsky. Item 7.01, Superintendent Matters. Dr. Brabrand.
Thank you, Chairman Anderson. I'll be brief in my comments to you all tonight, given the hour, but I wanted to share just a couple of quick things. Music recognition. FCPS has been named the best community for music education by the National Association for Music Merchants Foundation. We were recognized for our outstanding commitment to music education and providing efforts to support music access and education to all students. And to qualify for this designation, we provided information on funding, grad requirements, music class participation, facility support for the music program, and community music making programs. We're one of 686 school divisions nationwide. And again, there are 10,000 plus school districts nationwide, 686 that receive this designation. Wonderful. Speaking about returning to school in the fall, we have kindergarten registration well underway. A reminder to families with kids who will turn 5 on or by September 30th. It is time to register your child for kindergarten. For more information on how to register your child, please visit our website and contact your child's elementary school. If you aren't sure which school your child will attend, you can go to our website, type in your address, and find that school for your child. We'll be welcoming our kindergarten students and all of our students to 5 days of in-person instruction. And people have asked, I heard even tonight in public comment, how are we doing it differently? We talked a lot about that earlier, just in this work session earlier this week. First, we're going to be following CDC guidance to the maximum extent practicable, given the Virginia state law effective July 1. We've been following CDC guidelines, of course, now, and we're going to continue to do our best to do it to the maximum extent practicable. We're going to have our bell schedules back at pre-pandemic schedules. We're going to have our classroom monitors gone and all of our teachers back in the building. So things are going to be different in the fall to allow us to have all kids back. I want that to be very clear to the community. And finally, I really appreciated this board tonight having the Arab American Heritage Resolution and the comments of Ms. Omesh and other board members. And I wanted you all to know that I was invited by the Arab American Foundation Sunday afternoon. I'll be making comments as they honor National Arab American Heritage Month. So I'm excited about doing that and spending my Sunday afternoon sharing comments and really celebrating the rich cultural and ethnic diversity of Fairfax County and Fairfax County Public Schools. So thank you all very much, and I will see you all soon.
Thank you, Dr. Brabrand. Agenda item 8.01, Board Committee Reports. I call on Mr. Frisch for a Governance Committee report.
Thank you. I'll keep this quick. The Governance Committee met week before last, and we moved several policies forward for the full board's discussion. You'll see those on our agenda tonight under new business, dealing with procurement, contracting, also dealing with school counseling services. So I look forward to those conversations in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Keys-Gamarra for an audit committee report.
Thank you. We had a rather robust audit committee meeting. First, we talked about the hiring and onboarding audit. It has been completed and will be discussed at the May meeting. It will provide a benchmark hiring and onboarding procedures to identify any areas for improvement, to evaluate hiring policies and procedures for new employees and review for consistent adherence to schools and central offices, and to ensure controls exist around employee verification and eligibility. We also review the request for a business continuity plan audit. FCPS management requested an extension, and this audit would cover how we have our crisis plans, etc. Due to the pandemic, our superintendent and our staff asked for that extension, but he also promised to allow us to have access so that we can complete that audit during the 2021 school year. We also have completed the fidelity of implementation of school board actions audit. The report has been shared with the full board, and the finding was that for both school board motions and forum topic consensus items, there was no centralized tracking or reporting process to document and ensure all actions are seen to resolution when applicable in a clear and conspicuous manner. Our Auditor General made several recommendations, and the Audit Committee will be reviewing this with respect to motions as well as next steps. We also have the budget-driven audit recommendations, 3 outstanding recommendations from the fiscal year 18 facilities maintenance and audit are budget-driven, and the Audit Committee will be working with our Auditor General in order to make sure that as we considered our budget, we can also consider these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Agenda item 9.01, board matters. As we've been doing as of late, I will call on 3 board members, so please follow each other. We will start with Ms. Jenna Kofax, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, and Ms. Cohen. Ms. Jenna Kofax, Keys-Gamarra, and Cohen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Briefly, I just want to say I look forward to celebrating the dedication of John R. Lewis High School tomorrow night. I look forward to seeing my colleagues and many other of Congressman Lewis's colleagues there as well. And I know there will be some student performances, which I'm looking forward to seeing. But due to some social distancing restrictions, much of the community has been provided virtual links to this. So I really look forward to this. This has been a long time coming, and that is it for tonight. So we're looking forward to celebrating tomorrow.
Yes, I want to report that I had the opportunity to meet with our Chinese American Parents Association and discuss their concerns regarding some of the recent difficult things that our Asian community has been experiencing. And I look forward to collaborating with them in the future. And I too am looking forward to celebrating with our colleagues as we recognize and place the fully officially recognize the name of John Lewis on the high school. I also want to thank whoever wrote the Jeopardy question and included our high school there and allowed us to have such a timely celebration in an unexpected way. So I look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow, and have a great week, everybody.
Since May 25th, we have watched George Floyd's murder on every news media outlet. We've heard him cry out for his mother and plead that he could not breathe. We have wept, we have marched, we have prayed for not only George Floyd and his loved ones, but for the soul of our nation. On Tuesday, we watched a jury say the words that we prayed to hear, that George Floyd mattered, that his life mattered, that Black Lives Matter. On Tuesday, we watched the criminal justice system work as it was designed to do. But let us remember that this day was remarkable because our Black and brown friends have grown accustomed to a system that holds no justice for them. So while we celebrate the jury's decision, let us not forget that the work is not done and that work begins here in FCPS. It begins in our classrooms and in our hallways and in our homes. I'm grateful to our equity team for beginning that work here, and I look forward to partnering with them to make our schools a place where all of our students feel not only safe, but feel seen and heard. I do want to say that I'm so appreciative of all of our staff and everything they've done these last weeks to get even more of our students back into our buildings safely and successfully. I know that the creativity that they have had to show including kids bringing beach towels and figuring out really creative ways for snack time and nature walks. I just appreciate all that you've put into it. I really enjoyed my time at Silverbrook Elementary, West Springfield Elementary, Cherry Run Elementary, and was super excited to purple up for my visits to Fairview and White Oaks Elementaries yesterday. I look forward to visiting Greenbrier East in the morning. It's been wonderful to see all of our schools do what they do best. And it's been wonderful to see our kids back in the classrooms and doing really well online. And I look forward to a lot more of that in the weeks to come and in the fall for sure. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. The next speakers, Ms. Omesh, Ms. Marin, and Mr. Frisch.
Thank you. I'm happy to follow Ms. Cohen. I think, reflecting on obviously the Chauvin case shows us it shows us what's possible. So there's some hope and optimism there, but it certainly doesn't show us what's probable in our country. And I think that's something for us to continue thinking about. And I just want to name, over the course of the past month, we heard today from a student, of course, about the hate that Asian Americans have been experiencing. We know that there's continued hate against so many different groups. Our trans brothers and sisters across this country have also been experiencing quite the bit of hate in recent weeks. And I think that those are things for us to reflect on right before the celebration of Lewis tomorrow and thinking of what that symbolizes. And hopefully the page we can start to turn even more starting right here in Fairfax. And it leads again to the conversation about accountability. What are we going to do structurally to say that these are not things we tolerate and that we want students to grow and to develop in their thinking and in their ability to understand one another? And that's not going to happen because of talk. So I really do look forward to some of the steps moving forward, as I've shared with colleagues that I plan to bring, and have been pleased with some folks who have already reached out about their interest. Finally, on a lighter note, happy Earth Day to everyone. I do think it's a beautiful time for us to evaluate our own practices, to remember how we can be more environmentally friendly. This is a year that we saw our first electric bus be introduced in Fairfax County, a really exciting development. And of course, the conversations around outdoor classrooms, which I know some of my colleagues are really passionate about, are continuing. So I hope that as we talk about social justice, we also think of environmental justice as a key component within that. And we continue to grow together in better understanding how we can shape a better future for all of us.
Good evening and happy Earth Day. Yes, I actually had a fantastic Earth Day celebrating with about 24 students from Carson Middle School and Robinson Secondary at the annual School Environmental Action Showcase, or SEAS. And this is an event that I've been part of in some way for many, many years, and it was a thrill to be able to facilitate a conversation today for our middle school students with State Delegate David Bulova and another local partner, Ms. Celeste Land, who has been a longtime environmental ed supporter. And the students were very focused on electric cars and what kind of legislation was going to support more electric cars, more renewable energy. Also talk about reducing single-use plastic and plastic bags. So I think they learned a lot about how to advocate and certainly share the resources of Get to Green. I also was reminded today that the state budget did approve two staff members to work on environmental and outdoor education at the state level. So this is huge, and it's something that Ms. Tolan and I advocated for before we were elected. And so it's a great opportunity, and it's one of the things I'm very eager to get back to focusing on as we get through COVID. The other thing I'm focusing on is anti-racism and anti-bias. And so this Sunday I'm having a town hall to discuss those issues and hear from the community about bias in our curriculum. So very specifically about the content that our children learn, but also how our staff is trained to engage them and facilitate that content, expanding what we're teaching, not only about Arab Americans, but all sorts of groups and cultures. I've been reading so much, and there's just so much that our kids will benefit from knowing. I too am excited to attend the Lewis rededication. And while it is remarkable in some ways, it's also unordinary. It's not really extraordinary because it should have been done a long time ago. And it should have been done in response to community requests. So Friday we will celebrate justice though, and we will honor our students whose educational home is now in a building bearing the name of a civil rights warrior. And that is something to be celebrated. Just on Monday, I'll be focusing on Reston. There's 2 community meetings, one with neighborhood school readiness teams that do a lot of work to ensure that children, especially those that haven't had early childhood education, are coming into our schools as prepared as possible. And then that evening, I'll be joining Assistant Superintendent for Facilities and Planning, Jeff Plattenberg, at the invitation of Hunter Mill Supervisor Walter Alcorn to attend the Reston Comprehensive Plan Study Task Force. And we've been specifically invited to talk about facilities needs for our schools as Reston goes through some creative work about the community. So I really appreciate Mr. Alcorn's inclusion of us in this timely discussion. On other news, we're in the throes of the budget season. We're working eagerly with our county Board of Supervisors, so there'll be a lot more on that. And then I'm looking forward to Teacher Appreciation Week coming up so we can honor all of our teachers who've done so much for us this year. Thank you.
All right, as others have said, today is Earth Day, and I am grateful for students who have regularly reminded us that every level of government must do its part to tackle the crisis of climate in this country. And it's thanks to their advocacy on electric buses, solar on our schools, net zero buildings, and more that we are on the right path. So I'm grateful for that. Last weekend, I was able to get an early start celebrating Earth Week with Supervisor Dahlia Palchik at Blake Lane Park in Oakton. We met with Girl Scouts and community members and advocates and helped plant some trees and remove invasive species. We also celebrated the Board of Supervisors' vote to preserve the park by transferring it to the Fairfax County Park Authority. Since our last regular meeting, I have visited a few schools and talked with principals and teachers about our approach to literacy and reading instruction, the challenges of the concurrent model, and the creative solutions that they're invoking to provide 4 days of in-person instruction each week for as many students as possible. In the week ahead, I am, like my colleagues, looking forward to the Lewis High School dedication. I'll be volunteering with Food for Neighbors right here at Luther Jackson Middle School in Providence District, and I will be visiting more schools. Before I close, I do want to talk briefly about the trial of George Floyd's murderer. When the guilty verdict was finally read by the judge this week, I hopped on Twitter to see what people were saying. As you can imagine, what I found was a mix of hope and hate. Digging a little deeper, I found FCPS students weighing in. They talked about the nature of justice. They debated the future of policing. They argued about the persistence of systemic racism. They tweeted about the emotional toll these events and these incidents have on their mental health. I think we all know that systemic injustice did not start with one case, and fixing systemic injustice will not be done with a single case. But watching the dialogue of our students that I saw following the verdict gives me tremendous hope about our future. And knowing that we're all in this together to fix this and get it right is gratifying. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frisch. Our next three speakers are Ms. Corbett Sanders, Ms. Tolan, and Ms. McLaughlin.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad to follow Mr. Frisch. Before I talk about specifics of board matters, I do want to address the importance of lessons learned from the Chauvin case and the fact that the reason that the successful verdict was arrived at was because of the brave people, the young people who pulled out their phones and videotaped and made that information available and held the system accountable. And that's something that I think we should be applauding because it shows hope for the future, but it also indicates that we need to support the willingness and the innovation of our students in and young people in holding the system accountable. And so I would urge that we use that same approach when we address challenges here in Fairfax County and within our school system dealing with bias and hate. And so, because let's be clear, that was hateful, what occurred. 9 minutes and 25 seconds of hate. So moving on, this week has been a chat, you know, it's had its pain and it's had its celebrations. And one of the great celebrations that I was able to participate in was the dedication of the historical marker being reinstalled in Gum Springs. For those of you who don't know about Gum Springs, it is the oldest Black community in Fairfax County, and it is historically very important, not only for the county, but to Mount Vernon. And due to a traffic accident where somebody took out the historical marker and didn't have any insurance, and the way that the system worked, we had to raise funds to get the marker back up. I just thought it was wonderful to see, and then to come back and read an email that says that the state or the county wants our students to identify locations for historical markers in each of the magisterial districts. So I'm very excited about this opportunity for all of our students to do this, and I'm hoping that there might be a historical marker on Quanda Road soon. Also want to send a shout out and a great thank you to all of our principals, our facilities folks, and our regional staff in making sure that as many of our buildings that have opened up for 4 days a week have done so, and that they're continuing to work to get even more of our kids back into school 4 days a week. So it's wonderful to see. It's been fun to visit schools and see our kids It's an exciting time. Additionally, I'm going to be cheering on South County Stallions on Saturday as they compete for the national or for the state championship against the James Madison Warhawks. And so I know Drainsville and I know Providence, you all have students at Madison, but I will be hoping to see the Stallions bring that trophy home. Then just one additional piece, Fairfax County Public Schools is not only registering for our kindergartners, we have slots for pre-K and early Head Start, and that means for students from 6 weeks to 2 years old. So if you know children that can benefit from this and meet the criteria for Head Start, please have them register. We certainly want to have as many of our kids in early education as possible. And with that, good night.
Okay, happy Earth Day. I had to start with that. I also spent the morning with our Robinson High School IBESS class, hearing about projects on endangered species and clean water, where I worked with Senator Jennifer Boysko and Secretary of Education Carney to encourage the students' work in advocacy. Many of our schools, like Robinson, participated in the Student Environmental Action Showcase today. Students presented solutions on renewable energy, clean water, wildlife habitat, transportation, etc., all ways to make the earth a better place for all of us. Big news from the showcase today, hot off the press. Rachel Carson Middle School took 4th place, 5th place, and 7th place with 3 of their teams. They took 3 places out of 10 of the top 10 places in the Caring for the Watershed program. So congratulations, Ms. Pekarsky. And also, hot off the press, I'm super excited. This is a great Earth Day announcement. Delegate Murphy passed House Resolution 545, which was a resolution to honor Franklin Sherman Elementary School as a 2-time Eagle Schools Green Flag winner. Franklin Sherman is a Green Flag school that has kept their Eagle Schools team going through the pandemic. Franklin Sherman Elementary School has promoted waste reduction and energy management, built and maintained habitats for wildlife, produced vegetables for the community from raised bed gardens with help from a Nova horticulturalist student. The school donates unused food from the cafeteria to a food bank, and members of the Franklin Sherman Elementary School's PTA coordinated a local Cub Scout troop and 8 local families to clean and mulch the school's garden beds to prepare for new crops in spring 2021. They are planning to donate the food that they grow in these beds to Share of McLean. So congratulations, Franklin Sherman. On other notes of news in Drainsville, Churchill Road Elementary School has a new playground. Thank you so much to facilities for your help in putting that up. We celebrated that last week. I'm looking forward to being out at Churchill Road this week, working with the 2nd grade team to get the kids outside, hiking through some of the beautiful outdoor learning spaces that they have at that school. I've also had the good fortune of meeting with our Chinese American Parent Association and hearing about some of their resources that they have for families, and we'll be planning to continue these conversations. Herndon Elementary School just started the search for a new principal, so that's very exciting. I'll be meeting next week with Drainsville PTA leaders and student leaders, and tomorrow visiting Herndon Middle School, helping out with their outdoor lunch spaces. And we'll also visit Herndon High School tomorrow. Super excited to see our students in school 4 days a week, and happy that many of our Drainsville schools, most of them, have done very well with this. Super proud of our principals and teachers and all of our staff. Thank you so much for all of the work that you've done to make this happen. The Longfellow Middle School and Cooper Middle School teams are both going to the National Science Olympiad competition, so we're very proud of them. I also want to commend Michelle Liu from Longfellow Middle School. You all met her at the last meeting that we had when she presented her video on work that she's doing around AAPI education and curriculum. She was honored last week with an award from E-Girl Power for her work in raising awareness around the need for AAPI education. The celebration took place yesterday at Longfellow Middle School, and I was thrilled to be there. She also won an essay competition for a piece that she wrote on this topic. And I'm also very proud of our McLean student that spoke tonight, Kathy Zhang, who spoke to us about the same topic. That was a long list for Drainesville. I'll pass it on to the next speaker.
Great, my turn. First of all, like many of my colleagues, I have really enjoyed being able to go out and visit the schools in the Braddock District. I've seen 8 of them in just the last 2 weeks. And Dr. Brabrand, I just want to tell you that the dedication of your principals and their staff to find the solutions to bring back as many children as possible who were eligible as hybrid students has been phenomenal. Your regional teams have also worked extremely hard. And I absolutely want to give a shout out to our amazing Deputy Superintendent, Frances Ivey. I know that she is leading by example in helping this problem-solving effort. And I couldn't be more grateful on behalf of our families. Every email that I get from them, the joy and excitement. The kids, every time you ask them, they put up double hands when I say, how many of you enjoying being back? It's double hands, some jumping out of their seats. They're so happy. And so for that, I'm very grateful. I've also heard how our custodians are unsung heroes, how they are just absolutely finding the ways, especially reopening spaces like gyms and multipurpose rooms, reconfiguring our cafeterias. It's just outstanding. So it's made me so proud of how hard our system took this effort coming back from spring break and so quickly doing it. And I also want to thank our families as well. Your continued advocacy, your focus in helping us to identify where our challenges are, it helps make a difference. We cannot do this alone, and your partnership and your patience and your desire to help your child and help every child thrive is greatly appreciated. In terms of Happy Earth Day, I do want to say that a special shout out to our Assistant Superintendent of Facilities, Jeff Plattenberg, and his team. I was interviewed by the Robinson Students Morning Show today, and I'm going to send out to all of my colleagues the responses to the questions that I received in advance. Jeff and his team put together an incredible amount of information, and I was told by the students that the wealth of information I presented just was very exciting to them, and the credit goes, Dr. Brabrand, again, to great staff you have and what they produced for me. And then finally, I do want to say how excited I am to join my colleagues tomorrow in celebration of the renaming of the John R. Lewis High School. It really is just a profound and happy celebration, not just for the Lewis community, but for this board and for Fairfax County Schools in general. But I do want to take this moment and really thank my prior colleagues on the board, because I do want to reassure all of you sitting here tonight that the prior board, absolutely under the leadership of Ms. Derenak Koufax, brought it to us as soon as her community said that we would like to consider this name change, and for all the right reasons when we changed Justice High School's name. So I don't want anyone to be left with the impression that the prior board didn't do or didn't act soon enough. We absolutely did what we were committed to doing, which is helping to create a dialogue, a conversation. We also worked to improve our renaming process, and all of that lent to what I believe is going to show tomorrow when we, as a board, partner with our communities, we can find ourselves in a really beautiful place. And so I want to thank Ms. Darren at Kofax because I have the opportunity here at the microphone. This has been a long journey for you in representing your community, and you've put in a lot of work behind the scenes that nobody knows in preparing for tomorrow's celebration, along with the principal, along with the regional superintendent. But it really, truly is going to make tomorrow very special, and I'm excited for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, then Ms. Pekarsky.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I just wanted to say I too am thrilled to see classrooms both virtually and in person. I'm thrilled to see our students back in the building, but also see them still learning online and our teachers doing amazing efforts in balancing both. I'm very excited to announce that this Saturday will be our second traffic stop event for people with disabilities and police officers to practice safe interactions for people with disabilities, both people who are already driving and those who are not in parked cars. So I'm really, really thrilled about that. I'm also thrilled about the changes to the governor's restrictions on spectators for arts and music, because our arts, and thank you to everybody who advocated for that, because our arts and music parents are just as proud as our sports parents and deserve just as much right to safely be able to watch their students perform. So I am thrilled about that. So thank you, Dr. Brabrand. I know you all advocated strongly for that.
I just have to say, breaking news, we expect to have further guidance that will actually expand capacity for our in-person graduations and for social gatherings. We'll have updates in the days ahead to share with the board and the community from another update from the governor just in the last 24 hours. Thank you.
Yay, well that's exciting. I was going to say I'm excited to actually be able to see my son perform in his high school play. So, but I also want to say I'm wearing purple today for Month of the Military Child. I have, as a former military spouse for just a short time, I saw firsthand the amount of sacrifices our military families and our military-connected children make. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to all of our children for their resilience and their strength, especially in this year. I did want to especially thank our principals, our facility folks, our staff, our region leadership, and as Ms. McLaughlin said, Dr. Ivy, it's been an incredible effort on the part of our principals and all of our staff to go from expecting 2 days a week to change CDC guidelines to bringing in students for 4 days a week. And I am so impressed, not just at their ability to do it, but their grace and kindness and empathy in the way they've done it and the way they've communicated about it. So I just wanted to say I really appreciate the work of our principals and our region leadership in supporting them in that work. As Earth Day today, I always think about this on Earth Day, that in the midst of all of our differences, we actually share one home, and that's our planet, right? And COVID has laid bare to the truth that we're also all responsible for each other. We're all one people, and we must come together to save each other. And in the last year, what I've seen more than anything else is our students recognize that truth and shoulder that responsibility with a maturity beyond their years, even as it seems the adults around them are fighting and divided. This weekend, I was at the Lake Braddock Bruin Band Bash. Say that 5 times faster. And this was, for these kids, their entire marching band season in one day. And I stood there and I watched the 3 drum majors who had worked for 4 years as hard as our athletes do to become drum majors, standing on their stands, tall and proud, directing their peers on the field for the first time. And they all wore shirts. The back of their shirt had the word Ubuntu. These shirts were a gift from the band to the students. This word Ubuntu is an African philosophy that roughly translates to I am because you are. It is a common humanity, a oneness, a humanity in you and me both. These students were the embodiment of that humanity. They stood there. They weren't lamenting. They weren't angry. They weren't sad. They were tall and proud and united and grateful and joyful in making this music and accepting of their role in combating a global pandemic. They understood that they are because we are. On Earth Day, in the middle of a global pandemic, the ones who knew the best that we are all interconnected and responsible for each other were those students on that field and those drum majors leading them. They were the perfect embodiment of Ubuntu. They will show us the path forward to healing and unity if we're willing to listen. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I also want to thank all our regional superintendents that have worked with our principals, our staff, our teachers. Everybody has really moved mountains, and families are really grateful for it, and so our kids. It really makes a difference. So I am forever grateful that we have been able to do that this year, and really looking forward to the fall. Also as a parent, I'll be honest. Today I got to go to a ribbon cutting for our first solar array at Centerville Elementary School. Yes, and it really was the highlight of the week. So I did send Ms. Mulberg some pictures because I wanted to share some with you. It was great. This is part of the Solar in Schools program from Dominion Energy, and it provides our students the chance to observe and learn firsthand about solar energy. In addition to the solar panel, our schools received educational materials and training. And our students will be able to actually track the generation of electrical power by viewing it in the data system through their iPads, and they'll be able to actually have competitions with other school districts. So it's a lot of fun, and we talk a lot on this board about outdoor learning and environmental learning, and Centerville is an amazing, amazing example of things we can do. So I invite any of you anytime to come over to the Sully District and visit us, because there are really some incredible things going on. And I also want to say congratulations to quite a few Fairfax County students who participated in the Fairfax Parks Poetry Contest for Earth Day, and including one of my Sully students at Bull Run that won in grades 4 through 6. So that's pretty exciting. Our kids are pretty exciting, and they're really neat, and the future is in good hands, and I urge you to find those poems and read a little bit and hear their voices. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pekarsky. Very similarly to my colleague, Mr. Frisch, I will be here tomorrow along with my children volunteering at the Food for Neighbors event here at Luther Jackson. This is an event that takes place every other month, and they're expected to have numerous volunteers to sort groceries and drivers just collecting them. It's just a wonderful opportunity, and I'm looking forward to contributing. We've been very busy in the Mason District, and I have to say we have kept our region office hopping. So I do want to send a very special shout out to Dr. Zuluaga, Dr. Menui, Dr. Mitchell, and Ms. Gross at the Region 2 office, because this week it seems as if I spent most of my time with them between meetings for principal selections for Columbia and Justice, the Braddock renovation this week, and the numerous meetings that were held for the boundary study with the Justice Pyramid community. 3 options were presented to our parents over 4 separate community meetings this week, and the options were based on the feedback that we received the previous month. Over 400 community members registered for these meetings, and this is not due to any small feat. Dr. Zuluaga was very dogged and determined and worked very hard with our parent liaisons to make sure that we could have really significant outreach in order to have that many of our parents participate. I'm also very grateful that we had some school board members who participated. Ms. Sizemore Heiser joined, as well as Ms. Tolan. So thank you for your support and guidance. We're looking forward to the next steps of the project, where we are able to provide a recommendation, where staff is able to provide a recommendation to the board and the public hearing, and to move that project along for Glen Forest. I also want to say I'm very excited about the John R. Lewis rededication tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to participating in that event. For me, it will be the best capstone of this very difficult week, which many of you spoke to a little while ago. My last comment is one to say happy birthday to Ms. Pekarsky, whose day is tomorrow. So happy birthday to you, and we have one coming up very soon, and I don't think we have a board meeting between then, so I want to say happy early birthday to Ms. Corbett Sanders, because that will be happening on the 1st, the 3rd. So it's coming up before we have another meeting, so I did not want to miss that opportunity. And I believe that is it for us for this night. It is 10:38, and our meeting is adjourned. Good night, all.